The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a cloud of Wyoming dust that tasted like failure. Clara Whitaker climbed down with all the grace of a woman who'd stopped caring what people thought about 3 towns ago. Heavy-set, plain-faced, wearing a dress that had seen better years and a bonnet that hadn't. She looked exactly like what she was, a widow with nowhere left to go. The driver tossed her trunk down without ceremony. It hit the dirt with a thud that summarized her prospects nicely. "Iron Ridge Ranch is 6 miles that way," he said, already climbing back up. "You sure about this, ma'am?" Clara picked up her trunk. Surprisingly strong grip for a woman the townspeople had written off, and didn't bother answering. Sure didn't enter into it. She had $12, a cast-iron skillet, and a letter from some territorial employment office that promised work to anyone desperate enough to cook for ranch hands in the middle of nowhere. Desperate. That word had been following her like a shadow. The walk took 4 hours. The Wyoming sun beat down like punishment, turning her dress into a sweat-soaked shroud. Her feet blistered. The trunk got heavier with every step. But Clara Whitaker had learned something in her 38 years. You keep moving or you die. Those were the only choices that mattered. Iron Ridge Ranch announced itself with a weathered sign and the smell of horses, leather, and hard labor. The main house stood solid but unwelcoming, timber and stone, built to survive winters that killed weak things. The bunkhouse squatted nearby, functional as a fist. Corrals stretched into the distance where cattle moved like a dark sea. Men stopped working to stare. Clara had expected that. She'd been stared at her whole life. Wrong size, wrong face, wrong everything. She kept walking, chin up, heading for what looked like the main house. A man stepped out before she reached the porch. Ethan Cross wasn't tall, maybe 5'10", but he had the kind of presence that made height irrelevant. Early 40s, weathered, with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone that spoke of violence survived. His eyes were the color of winter sky, pale, cold, assessing. He wore work clothes like armor, canvas pants, cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up over forearms roped with muscle and old scars, a leather vest that had seen a decade of use. He looked at Clara the way you'd look at a horse you weren't sure would make it through the season. "You're the cook." Not a question. "I am. Late. Stagecoach doesn't run on my schedule." His eyes flickered, surprise maybe, or irritation. Hard to tell with a face that looked like it had forgotten how to register anything softer than suspicion. "Name's Ethan Cross. I run this ranch." He gestured toward the bunkhouse where 6 men had gathered to watch. "Crew's been without decent food for 3 weeks. Last cook quit. One before that died. You know what you're getting into?" "I know how to cook." "That's not what I asked." Clara set down her trunk with a deliberate thump. "Mr. Cross, I walked 6 miles in this heat carrying everything I own to get here. I'm a widow with no family, no property, and no prospects. I know exactly what I'm getting into. Question is whether you're desperate enough to hire me." Silence stretched between them, like wire pulled taut. Then something shifted in Ethan's expression. Not quite a smile, but close enough to count. "Kitchen's around back. Breakfast is 5:30. You're short, you're gone. You burn the food, you're gone. You cause trouble, you're gone. Understood?" "Understood." "Bunkhouse cook gets room off the kitchen. $20 a month. Sundays off unless we're branding or driving cattle." He paused. "And you don't go near the crew after dark. Ranch rules." The last part stung. The assumption that she'd be a problem that way, as if any man would look at her twice, but Clara swallowed it. She'd swallowed worse. "Where's the kitchen?" Ethan pointed. Clara picked up her trunk and walked. Behind her, she heard one of the hands say something low. The words didn't carry, but the laughter did. The kitchen was smaller than she'd hoped, bigger than she'd feared. Cast-iron stove that needed cleaning, rough-cut table, shelves of mismatched dishes, and supplies that looked like they'd been ordered by someone who thought food was just fuel. No organization, no sense, everything shoved wherever it fit. Clara's room was barely more than a closet, narrow bed, single window, hooks on the wall for clothes. She'd slept in worse. She didn't unpack. Instead, she went back to the kitchen and started working. The pantry told a story. Flour, dried beans, salt pork, coffee, cornmeal, molasses, lard, canned tomatoes, dried apples. Basic, brutal, Boring. The kind of supplies that kept men alive without giving them any reason to care about it. Clara pulled out her skillet, the one thing she'd carried from her old life, seasoned perfect over 15 years of marriage, and got to work. When the dinner bell rang at 6, 12 men filed in expecting the same slop they'd been choking down for weeks. What they got was pan-fried steak with onions and peppers, beans seasoned with molasses and bacon fat, cornbread that was actually moist, and dried apple pie that made the youngest hand close his eyes like he'd found religion. The room went quiet except for the sound of eating. Clara stood by the stove, arms crossed, watching. Nobody looked at her. Nobody thanked her. But every plate came back empty, and when she started cleaning up, one of the older hands, grizzled, probably 50, with a limp, set his plate by the wash basin himself instead of leaving it on the table. Small thing. Mattered anyway. She was scrubbing the last pot when Ethan appeared in the doorway. Crew wants to know if breakfast will be the same. Better. He almost smiled again. Almost. You know they're going to test you. I've been tested my whole life, Mr. Cross. Ethan. Clara. He nodded and left. That night, lying in her narrow bed, listening to the wind push against the walls, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Useful. Not wanted, not welcomed, not liked, but useful. It was enough. For now. The testing started at breakfast. Clara had biscuits, gravy, fried eggs, and bacon ready when the crew stumbled in at 5:30. Most of them looked like they'd been up drinking, one of the hazards of ranch life when the nearest town was half a day's ride. A young hand, couldn't be more than 20, cocky in the way young men get when they think being cruel makes them strong, sat down and immediately pushed his plate away. This bacon's burned. It wasn't. Clara had fried it perfect, crispy on the edges but still tender in the middle. She walked over, looked at the plate, looked at him. You don't want it, don't eat it. I'm just saying, a good cook would… Tommy. The older hand with the limp, she'd learned his name was Jack, spoke without looking up from his food. Shut up and eat. You're being an ass. Jack forked another biscuit onto his plate. And you're making me listen to it before I've had my coffee. Stop. Tommy's face went red, but he pulled the plate back and started eating. Silence settled again, thick but not hostile. Ethan sat at the head of the table, eating methodically, watching everything. When he finished, he stood, grabbed his hat, and walked past Clara on his way out. Good, he said quietly. Just that. Then he was gone. The days developed a rhythm. Clara cooked 3 meals, kept the kitchen clean, managed supplies, and stayed out of the way. The crew slowly divided into 3 camps, the ones who ignored her, the ones who appreciated her, and Tommy's small circle who seemed personally offended by her existence. She learned their names, their habits, their preferences. Jack liked his coffee strong enough to strip paint. Miguel, the youngest of the Mexican hands, had a sweet tooth that made him smile like a kid whenever she made anything with molasses. Big Sam, 6'4", gentle as a lamb despite looking like he could break horses with his bare hands, always said, "Thank you, ma'am," when he finished eating. Tommy and his 2 friends, Chet and Dawson, continued to find ways to make her life difficult, tracking mud across her clean floor, complaining about the food loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough to maintain deniability. Once she found her skillet accidentally left on the cold stove covered in bacon grease. Clara cleaned it, re-seasoned it, and made bacon for breakfast the next morning. That was so good even Tommy shut up. She didn't complain to Ethan. Didn't need to. This was ranch life, and she'd known what that meant. Prove yourself or get crushed. Ethan himself remained distant but present. He never ate in town, never missed a meal, and watched the crew with the kind of attention that missed nothing. Sometimes Clara caught him looking at her, assessing, measuring, trying to figure out what she was made of. She wondered the same thing about him. 3 weeks in, the first real trouble came. Clara had been in town exactly once, riding in the supply wagon with Jack to pick up flour, sugar, and other staples the ranch couldn't produce. Iron Ridge, the town, not the ranch, was small, functional, and unwelcoming. The general store owner had looked at her like she was something he'd found on his boot. The women on the street had given her the kind of looks that didn't need words. She'd expected that too. What she hadn't expected was Victoria Hale. Victoria was everything Clara wasn't: tall, elegant, beautiful in that effortless way that came from good breeding and better money. Mid-30s, perfectly dressed even in the frontier dust, with dark hair arranged in a style that probably required a maid. She owned the largest ranch in the territory along with her brother, inherited from their father, and ran the local social scene with the kind of power that came from being necessary. She'd walked past Clara in the general store like Clara was furniture. But when Clara was loading supplies into the wagon, Victoria had appeared again, this time with two other women from town, both dressed just as fine, both wearing the same expression of polite viciousness. "You're the new cook at Iron Ridge." Victoria's voice was smooth, cultured, dangerous. "Yes, ma'am." "How interesting." Victoria smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Ethan Cross has always had such practical tastes." The other women laughed. Light, musical, cruel. Clara kept loading flour. "I do hope you're planning to attend the church social next month," Victoria continued. "We'd all be so curious to meet Ethan's new employee." The pause before employee carried enough weight to flatten stone. Clara straightened up, met Victoria's eyes. "I'm not much for socials, ma'am." "No, I imagine not." Victoria's gaze traveled over Clara's body like she was livestock being assessed. "Well, do give Ethan my regards. Tell him I asked after him." They walked away, still laughing. Jack appeared at Clara's elbow. "Don't mind them. Victoria Hale's been trying to sink her claws into Ethan for 5 years. Drives her crazy that he won't bite." "Not my concern." "Isn't it?" Jack started loading the wagon. "Out here, everything's everyone's concern whether you like it or not." The ride back was quiet. Clara thought about Victoria's smile, the casual cruelty, the way she'd been dismissed without being worth the effort of real hostility. She'd been dismissed her whole life. Usually, it didn't bother her. This time it did, and she couldn't figure out why. That night, Tommy made his move. Dinner had gone fine: pot roast, potatoes, carrots, bread that Clara had started baking in the mornings because the crew demolished it. The men had eaten, talked, and filed out to the bunkhouse for their evening rituals of cards, drinking, and complaining about everything. Clara was washing dishes when Tommy came back. "Forgot something," he said, his voice carrying that edge young men get when they're working up to something stupid. Clara didn't turn around. "What?" "Just wanted to say." He moved closer. She could smell whiskey. "You're not bad for a fat old widow." Clara's hand stilled in the wash water. "I mean, you can cook, I'll give you that." Tommy was behind her now, too close. "And some men like a woman with more cushion." Clara turned, slowly, dripping hands held away from her body. "You need to leave." "I'm just talking." "No, you're not." Tommy's smile turned ugly. "What are you going to do? Tell Ethan. He doesn't care about you. You're just the cook. Hell, you should be grateful anyone's paying attention to you at all." The door opened. Ethan stood there, silhouetted against the evening light. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. Tommy went pale. "Boss, I was just out." "I didn't. Out. Now." Tommy scrambled for the door, nearly tripping over his own feet. When he was gone, silence filled the kitchen like water. Clara turned back to the dishes. "I had it handled." "I know." "Then why, Because you're my responsibility." Ethan's voice was flat, final. "Anyone causes you trouble, they answer to me. That's how this works." Clara didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if she should feel grateful or insulted or something else entirely. "Thank you," she managed. Ethan nodded and left. But something had shifted. Clara felt it like a change in weather, the way the air gets heavy before a storm. The crew felt it too. The next morning, Tommy and his friends were subdued, careful. The mocking stopped. The little cruelties dried up. Ethan had drawn a line. Everyone knew it. The weeks rolled forward. Spring turned toward summer, and the ranch work intensified. Branding, fence repair, moving cattle to new pastures. Endless labor that left the men exhausted and hungry. Clara cooked for them, fed them, kept them going. She started to understand the rhythm of this place. Harsh, beautiful, unforgiving. The land didn't care if you were strong or weak, pretty or plain, wanted or unwanted. It just demanded you survive it. And slowly, impossibly, Clara began to feel something she'd almost forgotten: belonging. Not because anyone said she belonged. Not because the crew suddenly liked her, or the work got easier, or the world got kinder, but because she was good at this, better than good. The crew depended on her, and she delivered. Day after day, meal after meal, she proved her worth in the only currency that mattered out here: reliability. Ethan noticed. He started checking in more often, not hovering, but present. Sometimes he'd come into the kitchen after the crew had eaten and sit at the table while Clara cleaned up, drinking coffee. Not talking much, but there anyway. "You plan to stay?" he asked one evening. Clara scrubbed a pot. "Unless you're firing me." "Not firing you." "Then I'm staying." Silence. Then, "Why'd you come out here, really?" Clara paused, considering. She could lie. Tell him something simple, clean, easy to digest. Instead, she told the truth. "My husband died 2 years ago. Left me with debts and a house I couldn't afford. Town blamed me, said I must have done something to drive him to work himself to death. Maybe I did. I don't know anymore." She went back to scrubbing. "I got tired of being the woman they pitied and blamed at the same time, so I left." "Where'd you go?" "Everywhere. Nowhere. Worked as a cook in Denver for 6 months until the restaurant closed. Tried a boarding house in Cheyenne. That didn't work out either." She rinsed the pot, set it aside. "Then I saw the listing for this job and I thought, well, at least if they don't want me there, it won't be personal." Ethan made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had more air behind it. "And now?" "Now I'm here. That's all." He stood, set his cup by the basin. "Clara." She looked up. "It's personal." His winter sky eyes held hers. "You stay. It's because I want you to. Not because you're desperate. Not because there's nowhere else. Because you belong here." Then he was gone, leaving Clara standing in her kitchen with dish soap on her hands and something warm and terrifying unfolding in her chest. The church social came whether Clara wanted it or not. Ethan announced at breakfast that anyone who wanted to go could ride into town that Sunday. Most of the crew jumped at the chance. Town meant whiskey, women, and a break from the endless work. Clara planned to stay behind. Cook for whoever remained, enjoy the quiet. But Ethan had other ideas. "You're coming," he said Saturday evening. "I don't think—" Wasn't a question. Clara stared at him. "Why?" "Because you work for me, and I'm not letting them treat my people like they're ashamed to be seen." His voice was hard. "You're part of this ranch. You show up. I'll just be—" "Clara." He stepped closer. "You're coming. Get a dress ready." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being stupid, that parading her in front of Victoria Hale and her circle would only make things worse. But the look on his face stopped her. This mattered to him. She didn't know why, but it did. "Fine," she said. Sunday arrived with perfect weather, warm sun, clear sky, the kind of day that made you believe the world might be kind. Clara wore her best dress, which wasn't saying much. Dark blue cotton, simple cut, clean, but obviously old. She'd done what she could with her hair, but there was only so much you could do with stubborn brown curls that had gone mostly gray. She looked exactly like what she was, a working woman trying to look presentable. Ethan wore clean clothes, black pants, white shirt, black vest, and looked like something out of a dime novel. Dangerous and controlled, with that scar catching the light. They rode into town in the wagon, along with Jack and Big Sam. Miguel had stayed behind to watch the place. The church social was held in the town square. Tables of food, games for children, men talking business, women talking everything else. The whole territory seemed to have shown up. Clara felt every eye turned toward them when they arrived. Victoria Hale materialized within minutes, elegant in green silk, smiling like a knife. "Ethan, how wonderful to see you." She completely ignored Clara. "And you brought everyone. How democratic." Ethan's expression didn't change. "Victoria, you must introduce me to your staff." Victoria's gaze finally, deliberately landed on Clara. "Oh, wait. We've met, haven't we?" "The cook." "Clara Whitaker," Ethan said, his voice carrying that edge Clara was learning to recognize. "My head cook. Best in the territory. Victoria's smile tightened. How lovely. I'm sure she's very capable. Other women had gathered, the same ones from the general store, plus a few more, all watching with barely concealed interest. Miss Whitaker, one of them said, false sweetness dripping. How brave of you to come. I know these events can be so intimidating for those who aren't used to society. Clara felt the trap closing. Say nothing, and she was admitting they were right. Say something, and she'd sound defensive. Ethan solved it for her. Clara runs a kitchen that feeds 12 men 3 times a day, manages supplies for a working ranch, and does it better than anyone I've ever hired. His voice was cold enough to frost glass. I imagine she could handle your tea parties with her eyes closed, Mrs. Henderson. Silence dropped like a stone. Victoria's face went carefully blank. Of course. How impressive. She turned to Ethan. Might I steal you for a moment? There's something I need to discuss about the Cattlemen's Association. Later. But, I said later, Victoria. And there it was. Ethan Cross choosing Clara over Victoria Hale in front of half the territory. The implications hit like thunder. Victoria's expression flickered. Rage, humiliation, calculation, before settling back into that smooth mask. Of course, how silly of me. Enjoy the social, Miss Whitaker. She glided away, her friends following like ladies in waiting. Clara's heart was hammering. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Ethan looked at her, and something in his face made her breath catch. Come on, let's get some food before I have to talk cattle with people I don't like. They walked through the social together, not touching, not obviously together, but together nonetheless. People stared, whispered, calculated. Clara felt exposed, vulnerable, terrified, but Ethan stayed beside her, solid as stone, and somehow that made it bearable. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Jack and Big Sam had stayed in town to drink. It was just Clara and Ethan in the wagon, the sun setting behind them, painting the sky in shades of fire. I'm sorry, Clara finally said. For what? For making things complicated. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. The wagon creaked. The horses plodded on. You didn't make anything complicated, Clara. It already was. He glanced at her. Victoria's been circling me for years. Her brother wants to merge our ranches, make some kind of empire. She figures marrying me is the easiest way to get what they want. And you don't want that. I want to run my ranch, live my life, and be left alone. He paused. Mostly. Something in that last word made Clara's chest tight. What happened to you? She asked quietly. The scar, the way you are. What happened? Ethan's jaw worked. War. Did things I'm not proud of. Saw things I can't forget. Came back and the only thing that made sense was work. Building something. Making something last. He looked at her. What about you? What happened to make you think you don't deserve better than this? Clara laughed, but it came out broken. This is better. You don't understand. Back there, in that town, in my old life, I was nothing. A burden. A failure. My husband worked himself to death trying to make enough money to keep me comfortable, and when he died, everyone blamed me. Said I'd been too much, wanted too much, needed too much. That's horseshit. Maybe. But it felt true enough. She looked out at the darkening land. Here, at least, I'm useful. That's more than I had before. Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop. They were still miles from the ranch, alone in the gathering dark. Clara, look at me. She did. You're not just useful, He stopped, searching for words. You're the best thing that's happened to this place in years. The crew respects you. The work gets done because you make sure they're fed and ready, and He stopped again, frustrated. I'm what? You're strong, real. You don't pretend to be something you're not, and you don't back down even when the world tells you to. His voice went rough. That matters. You matter. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Ethan, I'm just saying, you should know. He snapped the reins, and the wagon started moving again. They didn't speak the rest of the way home, but something had broken open between them, and Clara knew, with certainty that terrified her, that nothing would be the same. Well, that night, lying in her narrow bed, Clara stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what was happening. Ethan Cross wasn't the kind of man who said things he didn't mean. Every word out of his mouth was deliberate, measured, true, which meant he'd meant it. You matter. No one had ever said that to her. Not her parents, not her husband, not anyone in her 38 years. You matter. Clara rolled over, pulled the thin blanket up to her chin, and let herself feel it. The terrifying, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd found something worth fighting for. And if the world tried to take it away, she'd fight like hell. Because that's what you did when you finally found a place that felt like home. The week after the church social, Iron Ridge Ranch became the subject of every conversation in 3 counties. Clara heard about it from Jack, who'd gone into town for supplies and come back looking like he'd swallowed something sour. "They're talking," he said, unloading flour sacks onto the kitchen table. Clara didn't look up from the bread dough she was kneading. "They're always talking." "Not like this." Jack pulled out a chair, sat down heavy. "Victoria Hale's been making the rounds, says Ethan's lost his mind, says he publicly humiliated her for some—" He stopped. "For some what?" Jack's weathered face flushed. Her words, not mine. She said, "For some desperate woman who should know her place." Clara's hand stilled in the dough. She'd expected this. Knew it was coming the moment Ethan had chosen to stand beside her instead of playing Victoria's games. But knowing something's coming and feeling it hit are different things entirely. What else? "People are saying Ethan's involved with you, that you've got some kind of hold on him." Jack met her eyes. "I told them they were full of shit, but once people start talking, truth doesn't matter much." Clara went back to kneading, punching the dough harder than necessary. "I know how this works, Jack. Boss knows too. He doesn't care." "He should." "Why? Because Victoria Hale's got her nose out of joint?" Jack snorted. "She's been trying to trap Ethan into marriage since her father died and left her with more land than sense. Ethan knows what she is, a vulture in a fancy dress." Clara shaped the dough into loaves, set them aside to rise. "Doesn't change what people think." "No," Jack admitted. "But Ethan's never cared what people think. That's what makes him good at this." "At what?" "Surviving." Jack stood, grabbed his hat. "Out here, you got 2 choices. Bend to what everyone else wants, or stand your ground and damn the consequences. Ethan's always chosen the second one. Might be why he respects you so much. You do the same." He left before Clara could respond. She stood in her kitchen, hands covered in flour, and tried to understand what was happening. She'd come here expecting nothing, just work, shelter, a chance to survive. Instead, she'd stumbled into something complicated and dangerous, something that involved Ethan Cross's reputation and Victoria Hale's wounded pride and a whole territory full of people who had nothing better to do than speculate about 2 people who just wanted to be left alone. The smart thing would be to leave. Pack her trunk, walk away, find another job in another town where nobody knew her and she could start over clean. But Clara Whitaker had tried running. It hadn't worked. Every town was the same. Same judgments, same cruelties, different faces. At least here, she'd found something worth staying for, even if she couldn't name it yet. The dinner bell rang at 6. The crew filed in, talking about fence repairs and a section of pasture that needed clearing. They ate Clara's pot roast and potatoes without really noticing, too tired to do more than shovel food and grunt appreciation. Ethan came in last, like always. He sat at the head of the table, ate in silence, and when the crew had finished and filed out, he stayed. Clara started cleaning up. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavy with things unsaid. "Jack told you," Ethan finally said. "He did." "And?" Clara scrubbed a plate. "And what? You want me to apologize for existing? Tell you I'll leave so your reputation stays clean?" "No." "Then I don't know what you want from me, Ethan." She turned, dish soap dripping from her hands. "I didn't ask for any of this. I came here to cook. That's all. I'm doing my job. If that's not enough, it's enough." He stood, crossed to where she stood by the wash basin. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair, the scar tissue that pulled at the corner of his mouth. "More than enough. But I need to know if you're planning to run." "Why would I run?" "Because it's easier." His voice went rough. Because people are going to make your life hell. Victoria's already started, spreading rumors, turning the town against you. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Clara set down the plate she'd been washing. I've had people against me my whole life, Ethan. This isn't new. But you've always run before. The words hit like a slap. Clara's breath caught. That's not fair. Isn't it? Ethan's winter eyes held hers. You said it yourself. You've been running since your husband died. Different towns, different jobs, always moving before anyone could pin you down. I'm asking if you're going to do the same thing now. Clara wanted to be angry, wanted to tell him he had no right to judge her, no right to question her choices. But he was right, and they both knew it. I don't know, she said quietly. I don't know how to stay when the world wants me gone. Ethan reached out, slowly, carefully, like approaching a spooked horse, and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm, solid. Then learn, he said, because I'm asking you to stay. Clara looked down at their joined hands. Hers was smaller, softer despite years of work, still damp from dishwater. His engulfed it completely. Why? The word came out barely louder than breath. Because you belong here. He said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. Because this place works better with you in it. Because, he stopped, jaw working. Because I want you to. The air between them felt electric. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, loud in the quiet kitchen. Ethan, you don't have to say anything now. He released her hand, stepped back. Just think about it. And don't let Victoria Hale or anyone else make the decision for you. He left, boots heavy on the wooden floor. Clara stood alone in her kitchen, hands still tingling where he'd touched her, and wondered how her life had become so impossibly complicated. The next morning brought rain. Hard. Driving sheets that turned the ranch into a mud pit, and made every task 3 times harder. The crew slogged through their work cursing, and by the time they stumbled in for lunch, they were soaked, filthy, and mean-tempered. Clara had hot stew and fresh bread waiting. She'd learned early that weather like this required comfort food, something that stuck to ribs and reminded men they were still alive. Tommy came in last, looking worse than usual. He sat at the far end of the table, wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Jack noticed. You sick? No. You look like hell. I'm fine. But he wasn't. Clara saw him pick at his food, saw the way his hand shook slightly when he reached for his coffee. Something was wrong. After the crew had left, she found Tommy lingering by the door, staring out at the rain. You need something? She asked. He flinched, turned. Up close, she could see dark circles under his eyes, a pinched look around his mouth. I wanted to... He stopped, swallowed hard. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For before. For being an ass. Clara hadn't expected that. Why now? Because I heard what people are saying in town about you and the boss. Tommy's face flushed. And I realized I'm part of the problem. I treated you like dirt because it was easy, because you weren't going to fight back. That was wrong. Clara studied him. He looked miserable, genuinely ashamed, young and stupid and trying to be better. Apology accepted, she said. Tommy's shoulders sagged with relief. Really? Really. But Tommy... She waited until he met her eyes. Don't do it again. Not to me, not to anyone else. Being cruel doesn't make you strong. It just makes you cruel. He nodded, left quickly before the moment could get more uncomfortable. Clara went back to her dishes, feeling something shift. Tommy had been her clearest enemy, young, cocky, determined to prove she didn't belong. And now he'd apologized, changed. Maybe other things could change too. The rain continued for 3 days. On the second day, Ethan came into the kitchen during the afternoon lull, dripping water, looking exhausted. North fence is down, he said without preamble. Cattle got out. We're going to be riding in this mess until we get them back. Clara poured him coffee without asking. How bad? Bad enough. He wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat seep in. Could lose half the herd if we don't move fast. What do you need? He looked at her, surprised. What? What do you need? Clara repeated. Food that travels? Extra coffee? Blankets? Ethan's expression softened. All of that. We'll be out overnight, maybe longer. Clara nodded, already calculating. Give me an hour. She worked fast, wrapped sandwiches, filled canteens with hot coffee mixed with whiskey to keep the cold at bay, rolled blankets tight and tied them with twine. When the crew assembled by the barn, she had everything ready. Big Sam looked at the supplies like she'd performed a miracle. Miss Clara, you're an angel. I'm a cook. Now go get those cattle before they end up in the next territory. They rode out into the rain, Ethan at the front, the crew following. Clara watched until they disappeared into the gray curtain of weather, then went back inside and started preparing for their return. They'd be hungry, cold, probably hurt. She could fix at least two of those things. The kitchen became her fortress. She baked bread, made stew, prepared bandages and hot water in case someone came back injured. Miguel had stayed behind to watch the ranch. He appeared in the kitchen around dinner time, looking lost. Never seen the place this quiet, he said. Clara handed him a bowl of stew. Eat. Then help me move the big table closer to the stove. They're going to need warmth when they get back. Miguel did as told, grateful for something to do. They worked together in companionable silence, rearranging the kitchen, preparing for the crew's return. Miss Clara, Miguel said as they finished. Yeah? People in town say things about you and Mr. Cross. He looked uncomfortable. I just wanted to say, I don't care. You're good to us. That's what matters. Clara felt her throat tighten. Thanks, Miguel. I mean it. My mama always said you judge people by what they do, not what others say about them. You've been nothing but good since you got here. Anyone who can't see that is blind. He left before Clara could respond, but his words stayed with her. Miguel was 19, barely more than a kid, but he had more sense than most of the adults she'd known. The crew returned near midnight, soaked and exhausted but triumphant. They'd found the cattle, fixed the fence, and somehow managed not to lose anyone in the process. Ethan looked half dead. There was a cut over his left eye, probably from a branch, and he moved like every muscle hurt. Clara fed them without comment. Hot stew, bread, coffee, laced with whiskey. The men ate like they'd been starving, too tired for conversation. When they finally stumbled off to the bunkhouse, Ethan remained. You're bleeding, Clara said. He touched his forehead, looked at his fingers like he'd forgotten about the injury. It's nothing. Sit down. Sit. Down. He sat. Clara got her medical supplies, basic, but enough. She cleaned the cut with whiskey, felt Ethan flinch but stay still. Up close, she could see how exhausted he was, the way his shoulders sagged with more than just physical weariness. You can't keep doing this, she said quietly, pressing a clean cloth to the wound. Doing what? Carrying everything yourself, the ranch, the crew, all of it. You're going to break. Ethan caught her wrist gently. I'm not alone anymore. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Claire's breath hitched. Ethan, I know what people are saying. I know what it looks like, and I don't care. His grip tightened slightly. I haven't cared about anything in years except keeping this place running. But now... He stopped, searching for words. Now I care about you staying, about you being safe, about... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Clara set down the cloth, stepped back. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. This is a bad idea, she said. Probably. People will talk. Let them. Victoria Hale will make our lives hell. She already is. Ethan stood slowly, never breaking eye contact. Clara, I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I'm just asking you to think about it. About staying. About... He gestured between them. About this. There is no this. Isn't there? Clara wanted to deny it. Wanted to say he was imagining things, that she was just the cook, and he was just the boss, and nothing else existed between them. But that would be a lie, and she'd never been good at lying. I don't know what this is, she said instead. Then we'll figure it out. Ethan reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, gentle, careful, like she was something precious. Together. Then he left, and Clara stood alone in her kitchen, with her medical supplies scattered on the table and her entire world tilting sideways. The next week, Victoria Hale made her move. It started small. Whispers in the general store, pointed comments at the hotel, letters to the territorial newspaper about moral standards and appropriate behavior in frontier communities. Victoria was too smart to attack directly. Instead, she waged a campaign of innuendo and suggestion, letting other people draw their own conclusions. The conclusions they drew were predictable. Ethan Cross, respected rancher and war veteran, had been seduced by his cook. Clara Whitaker, desperate widow with no prospects, had used her feminine wiles to trap a good man. It was scandalous, inappropriate, disgraceful. Never mind that nothing had actually happened. Never mind that Clara and Ethan had barely touched, had never done anything more improper than talk in a kitchen. Truth didn't matter when scandal tasted this good. Jack brought the news along with the supplies. He looked furious. "They're saying you're living in sin," he told Clara bluntly. "Saying Ethan's keeping you as his—" He stopped, too decent to repeat it. Clara kept her face blank. "I see. It's horseshit. That doesn't make it less effective." Jack slammed a sack of flour onto the counter. "You want me to tell them the truth? Tell them you sleep in that closet off the kitchen and Ethan hasn't so much as held your hand? Would it matter?" "No," Jack admitted. "Probably not." Clara started putting supplies away, methodical and calm despite the rage building in her chest. "Then there's nothing to be done." "The hell there isn't." Ethan's voice came from the doorway. He walked in, took off his hat, looked at Jack. "What exactly are they saying?" Jack told him. All of it. The rumors, the speculation, Victoria's carefully worded suggestions that Clara was a woman of loose morals who'd taken advantage of Ethan's isolation and loneliness. Ethan's face went hard as stone. "That woman needs to learn when to quit." "What are you going to do?" Clara asked. "What I should have done weeks ago." He grabbed his hat. "I'm going into town." "Ethan, no." "Clara." He turned, and the look in his eyes made her stop. "I'm not letting them destroy you because Victoria Hale can't handle rejection. This ends now." He left before she could argue. Jack whistled low. "Well, that's going to be interesting." Claire's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the counter, forced herself to breathe. "He's going to make it worse." "Maybe. Or maybe he's going to do what needs doing." Jack headed for the door. "Either way, it's his choice. You don't get to carry this alone anymore." Clara wanted to scream, wanted to chase after Ethan and stop him from doing something stupid and noble and completely disastrous. But she stayed in her kitchen because running after him would only confirm everything people were already saying. So she cooked. Kneaded bread until her arms ached, scrubbed pots until they shined, cleaned every surface until the kitchen gleamed. Work was the only thing that made sense, the only thing she could control. Ethan returned 3 hours later. He came into the kitchen, sat down heavily, and looked at Clara with an expression she couldn't read. "What did you do?" she asked. "I went to Victoria's ranch. Told her if she didn't stop spreading lies about you, I'd make sure everyone in the territory knew why her father really left the ranch to her and not her brother." Clara's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means her brother's got a gambling problem that nearly bankrupted them 5 years ago. Victoria covered it up, paid his debts, and convinced her father to leave everything to her instead. She's been holding it over him ever since, using the ranch and the money to control him." Ethan's smile was cold. "She doesn't want that getting out. So you blackmailed her." "I gave her a choice. Leave us alone or face consequences. Same thing she's been doing to us." Clara sat down across from him. "That's going to make her hate us more." "Probably, but at least she'll do it quietly." He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "I'm sorry. I should have done this sooner." "You shouldn't have had to do it at all." Clara looked at their joined hands. "This is my fault." "No, it's not. If you hadn't come here, this place would still be barely functioning and I'd still be half alive." Ethan's grip tightened. Victoria would have found another way to cause trouble eventually. She always does. "At least this way, she's going after someone who can fight back." "I'm not sure I can." "Yes, you can." He said it with absolute certainty. "You're the strongest person I know, Clara. You just don't see it yet." She wanted to believe him, wanted to see herself the way he seemed to, strong, capable, worth defending, but a lifetime of being told otherwise was hard to shake. That night, lying in bed, Clara tried to make sense of her life. 2 months ago, she'd been alone, desperate, with nothing to her name but a trunk and a skillet. Now she had a job, a home, people who depended on her. and Ethan Cross, looking at her like she was something precious. It was too much, too fast, too good to be real. But it was real. She could feel it in the way the crew treated her with respect now, in Miguel's shy smiles and Jack's gruff protectiveness, in the way Ethan watched her across the kitchen, like he was memorizing her features. She'd spent her whole life being invisible. Now someone saw her. The question was, could she let herself be seen? The answer came faster than she expected. 2 days later, Victoria Hale showed up at Iron Ridge Ranch. Clara was in the kitchen, preparing lunch, when she heard the horse. She looked out the window and felt her stomach drop. Victoria rode side saddle, perfectly composed despite the dust. She wore a dark red dress that probably cost more than Clara made in a year, and her expression was carved from ice. Ethan met her in the yard. Clara couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could read their body language. Victoria's rigid posture, Ethan's crossed arms, the careful distance between them. Then Victoria turned and looked directly at the kitchen window. At Clara. The smile that crossed her face was pure venom. She said something to Ethan, short, sharp, then rode away without looking back. Ethan came into the kitchen looking like he'd aged 10 years. What did she want? Clara asked. To deliver a message. His voice was flat. She's hosting a dinner party next week for the Cattlemen's Association. She specifically invited both of us. Clara's blood went cold. That's a trap. Obviously. So we don't go. If we don't go, she wins. She gets to tell everyone I'm too ashamed to show my face, that you're too low class to attend proper society. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, and she'll use it to undermine me with the other ranchers. I need their cooperation to survive out here. Clara understood immediately. This was Victoria's play. Force them to attend or face professional consequences. Either way, she'd get what she wanted, humiliation or isolation. What if we go and she humiliates us anyway? Clara asked. Then we handle it. Ethan moved closer. Together. That word again. Together. Clara looked at this man, scarred, hardened, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with physical strength, and realized he was offering her something she'd never had before. Partnership. Not protection, not charity, but genuine alliance. I don't have anything to wear to a dinner party, she said. Ethan's smile was grim. We'll figure it out. The week before Victoria's dinner party passed in a blur of preparation and dread. Clara tried to focus on her work. But the approaching evening hung over everything like a storm cloud. Jack noticed her anxiety. You know Victoria's just going to make you miserable, right? That's the whole point. I know. And you're going anyway. Yes. Why? Clara chopped vegetables with more force than necessary. Because if I run now, I'll keep running forever, and I'm tired of running. Jack grunted approval. Fair enough. Want me to teach you how to throw a punch? Might come in handy. Despite everything, Clara laughed. I don't think punching Victoria Hale would help. Might make you feel better, though. The day before the party, a package arrived from town. Clara opened it to find a dress, simple but elegant, dark green silk with modest neckline and long sleeves. Nothing fancy, but clearly expensive and clearly tailored for her measurements. A note fell out. You're not facing them in rags. E. Clara held the dress against herself, looked in the small mirror by her bed. The woman looking back was still heavy-set, still plain, still everything she'd always been. But the dress fit. And for the first time in her life, Clara thought maybe that was enough. The dinner party was everything Clara had feared and worse. Victoria's house was enormous. 2 stories, white columns, the kind of place that announced money and power without subtlety. Carriages lined the drive. Well-dressed people mingled on the porch, their laughter carrying across the evening air. Clara and Ethan arrived in his ranch wagon because neither of them owned a proper carriage. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious. Ready? Ethan asked. Clara smoothed her borrowed dress. No. Good. Neither am I. He offered his arm. Let's go anyway. They walked in together, and the room fell silent. Victoria materialized immediately, resplendent in midnight blue, her smile sharp enough to cut. Ethan, Miss Whitaker, how wonderful you could join us. She said Miss Whitaker like it was a joke. The other guests watched with barely concealed interest. Clara recognized some of them. Ranchers, business owners, the banker, the doctor. People who mattered in this territory. People who were judging her right now. Victoria, Ethan said coolly, thank you for the invitation. Of course. I thought it was time we all became better acquainted with Miss Whitaker. After all, she's become such an important part of your household. Another poisonous smile. Do tell us, Miss Whitaker, how are you finding ranch life? So different from your previous circumstances, I imagine. The trap was obvious. Answer honestly and admit she'd been desperate. Deflect and look like she was hiding something. Clara chose honesty. It's hard work, but I prefer it to starving. Shocked silence. Then someone laughed. A genuine surprise sound. Victoria's smile flickered. How practical. I've learned to be. Clara met her eyes directly. Out here, practicality keeps you alive. Everything else is decoration. Another laugh, this time from multiple guests. Victoria's face went tight. Indeed. Well, dinner will be served shortly. I do hope the menu meets with your professional approval. The emphasis on professional made it clear what Victoria thought of Clara's profession. They moved into the dining room. It was excessive. Crystal chandeliers, imported china, silver that probably cost more than the entire Iron Ridge Ranch. Victoria had seated Clara and Ethan at the far end of the table, separated by several other guests. Another power play. Make them feel isolated, out of place. Dinner was torture. Course after course of elaborate food that Clara could have cooked better with one hand tied behind her back. The conversation swirled around cattle prices, politics, society gossip, all designed to make Clara feel excluded. She ate in silence, answered questions when asked, and watched Victoria work the room like a general commanding troops. Then came dessert, and Victoria struck. Miss Whitaker, she said, her voice carrying down the table. I've been dying to ask, what exactly are your qualifications? I mean, beyond cooking, of course. The implication was clear. What qualifications do you have to be sitting at this table? Clara set down her fork carefully. I can cook 3 meals a day for 12 men without complaint. I can manage supplies, budget expenses, and keep a kitchen running in the middle of nowhere with minimal resources. I can work 16-hour days without breaking, and I've never missed a meal or burned a pot. How rustic. Victoria's smile was all teeth. But I meant your social qualifications, your family background, your education. I have none. I see. My father was a farmer who drank himself to death. My mother died when I was 12. I have a 6th grade education and 0 social graces. Clara met Victoria's eyes. I'm a working woman from a working family, and I've never pretended to be anything else. The table had gone completely silent. How refreshingly honest, Victoria said, though I must say it does raise questions about your suitability for what? Ethan's voice cut through the room like a knife. For working? For earning a living? For being a decent person? Victoria turned to him, eyes glittering. For the company you're keeping, darling. People do talk. Let them. But your reputation, my reputation, Ethan said coldly, is built on 15 years of running a successful ranch, treating my workers fairly, and keeping my word. Clara Whitaker has done nothing but work hard and mind her own business. If that's not good enough for your social circle, Victoria, then maybe your social circle isn't worth impressing. Someone dropped their spoon. The clatter echoed. Victoria's composure finally cracked. How dare you? I dare because I'm tired of watching you use other people's lives as entertainment. Ethan stood. Clara, we're leaving. Clara rose, grateful and terrified. They'd just burned every bridge in the territory. Ethan offered his arm. She took it. They walked out in silence, leaving a room full of shocked faces behind them. In the wagon, Clara finally spoke. That was a disaster. That was overdue. Ethan snapped the reins, and the horses started moving. Victoria needed to hear it. They all did. They're going to ostracize us. Probably. Your business relationships will survive or they won't. I'm not playing Victoria's games anymore. He glanced at her. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me. I chose to come. Still, Clara was quiet for a moment, watching the stars appear as they left town behind. Ethan, what are we doing? What do you mean? This, us, whatever this is, she gestured helplessly. People think they assume that but we're not. We haven't, so what are we actually doing? Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop. They were alone on the dark road, miles from anywhere. "I don't know what," he said finally, "but I know I don't want you to leave. I know I think about you constantly. I know when I come into the kitchen and you're there, it's the best part of my day." He turned to face her fully. "I know I'm probably too old, too damaged, too set in my ways to be worth anyone's time. But if you're asking whether I care about you, the answer is yes." Clara couldn't breathe. "Ethan, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know." But Clara was tired of not saying things, tired of hiding what she felt because she was afraid of being hurt. "I care about you too," she said quietly, "and it terrifies me. Because everyone I've ever cared about has either died or left, or decided I wasn't worth the trouble. I don't know how to do this, how to let someone in without waiting for it to fall apart." Ethan reached out, cupped her face with one calloused hand. "Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. No promises, except to try." Clara leaned into his touch. Let herself have this moment of comfort and connection. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Okay. One day at a time." He smiled, genuine, warm, transforming his scarred face into something beautiful. Then he kissed her. It was gentle, careful, like he was afraid she might break. Clara kissed him back, pouring years of loneliness and longing into this one perfect moment. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "One day at a time," he repeated. "One day at a time," Clara agreed. They sat like that for a long moment, just breathing, just being. Then Ethan started the wagon moving again, and they headed home through the Wyoming darkness, together. The storm warning started 3 days after Victoria's dinner party. Old Pete, the ranch hand who'd been working cattle for 40 years and could read weather like other men read newspapers, came into the kitchen during breakfast looking grim. "Sky's wrong," he said without preamble. "Pressure's dropping. We're in for something bad." Ethan looked up from his coffee. "How bad?" "Bad enough I'd move the herd to high ground if I were you, and soon." The crew exchanged glances. Pete wasn't the kind to panic, which meant this was serious. Ethan stood, already calculating. "We move them today. Everyone who can ride, you're with me. Pete, you and Miguel secure the buildings. Anything that can blow away, tie it down. Clara." "I know what to do." She was already mentally cataloging supplies. If the crew was going to be out in weather like this, they'd need food that traveled, water, medical supplies in case someone got hurt. The men scattered. Within 20 minutes, the ranch had transformed from its usual organized chaos into something sharper, more urgent. This was survival mode, and everyone knew their role. Clara worked fast, packing saddlebags with wrapped sandwiches, jerky, dried fruit, canteens filled with water and coffee. She added bandages, whiskey for disinfecting wounds, matches sealed in oiled cloth. Everything a man might need if he got separated from the group. Ethan came into the kitchen as she was finishing. His face was set in that expression she'd come to recognize, focused, determined, already 3 steps ahead of whatever was coming. "Storm might last days," he said. "If it gets bad, don't try to come after us. You and Pete and Miguel stay here. Keep yourselves safe." Clara handed him a packed bag. "Don't be stupid out there." His mouth twitched. "I'll try." "Ethan." She caught his arm. "I mean it. Don't be a hero. The cattle aren't worth your life." Something softened in his expression. He covered her hand with his, squeezed once. "I'll come back." "You better." He kissed her then, quick and hard, in full view of anyone who might be watching. When he pulled away, Clara's heart was hammering. "One day at a time," he said. "One day at a time," she echoed. Then he was gone, and Clara was left standing in her kitchen with the smell of coming rain heavy in the air. The crew rode out within the hour. Clara watched them go. 12 men on horseback, driving nearly 200 head of cattle toward the high pastures where flooding would be less likely. It looked like something out of a painting, all that organized chaos moving as one. Then the first drops of rain started falling, and the painting turned dark. Pete appeared at her elbow. "Going to be a long few days, Miss Clara." "Then we better get ready." They worked together, Pete and Miguel and Clara, preparing the ranch for the onslaught. Shutters closed and barred, tools brought inside, the chicken coop reinforced, Supplies moved to higher shelves in case of flooding. By the time they finished, the rain was coming down steady, and the wind had picked up enough to rattle the windows. Miguel looked nervous. My mama used to say storms like this bring change. Your mama was smart, Pete said. Change is coming whether we like it or not. Question is whether we're ready for it. That night, Clara lay in her narrow bed, listening to rain hammer the roof, and wondered what Pete meant. Change was already here, had been here since that kiss on the dark road, since Ethan had looked at her like she mattered, since she'd decided to stop running. But storms had a way of accelerating things, forcing choices that might otherwise take years. She fell asleep to the sound of thunder and woke to worse. The rain had intensified overnight. By morning, it was coming down in sheets so thick you could barely see 10 feet. The yard had turned into a mud pit, and the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property had swollen to twice its normal size. Pete stood on the porch, staring at the water. Creek's rising fast. If it jumps its banks, we're going to have problems. How long until that happens? Clara asked. Hours, maybe. Depends how much rain we get. He spat into the mud. Never seen it come down this hard, this fast. By noon, the creek had jumped its banks. Water spread across the eastern pastures, turning solid ground into swamp. Miguel rode out to check the fences and came back soaked and shaken. Water's up to the horses' knees in some places, he reported, and it's still rising. Clara's mind raced. The supply shed was on the eastern side of the property, built on what was usually dry ground. If the water kept rising, everything in it would be ruined or washed away. Flour, sugar, salt, all the stores they'd need to survive the summer and make it through next winter. We need to move those supplies, she said. Pete shook his head. Too dangerous. That water's moving fast and you can't see what's under it. Step in the wrong place, you're done. We can't afford to lose those supplies. Can't afford to lose you either, Miss Clara. But Clara was already calculating. The supply shed wasn't that far, maybe 50 yards. The water was knee-deep, yes, but not impassable. If they worked fast, they could salvage at least the most critical items. I'm going, she said. Like hell you are. Pete grabbed her arm. Ethan would have my hide if I let you do something that stupid. Ethan's not here, and those supplies are the difference between this ranch surviving and going under. Clara pulled free. I'm not asking permission, Pete. Miguel stepped forward. I'll go with you. Miguel, you can't carry it all yourself, Miss Clara, and I'm younger and faster than Pete. He shot the older man an apologetic look. No offense. Pete cursed, long and creative. Fine, but you tie yourselves together with rope, and if that water gets any higher, you get out immediately. Understood? Understood, Clara said. They roped themselves together at the waist, leaving about 6 feet of line between them. Clara went first, stepping off the porch into water that was shockingly cold and moving faster than it looked. The current tugged at her skirts, tried to pull her sideways. She grabbed the rope for balance and kept moving. 50 yards had never seemed so far. The water was muddy, opaque. Every step was a gamble, solid ground or hidden hole, safe passage or disaster. Clara's feet slipped on submerged rocks. Something solid bumped against her leg and kept moving. Probably debris swept downstream. Behind her, Miguel was swearing in Spanish, a steady stream of words that would have made his mama slap him. They reached the supply shed breathing hard. The door was already partially underwater. Clara wrenched it open, and muddy water poured out along with a sack of flour that had split open and turned to paste. Grab what you can carry, she told Miguel. Top shelves first, anything that's still dry. They worked frantically, loading their arms with supplies and making the treacherous journey back to the main house. The water was rising perceptibly now, creeping up their legs with every trip. On the third crossing, Clara's foot found empty space where ground should be, a hole opened by the rushing water, and she went down hard. The current grabbed her immediately, tried to sweep her downstream. The rope jerked tight around her waist, and Miguel hauled backward with all his strength. Miss Clara! She clawed for purchase, hands scraping against mud and stones. Her mouth filled with dirty water. The supplies she'd been carrying were gone, swept away, but she barely noticed because staying above water took everything she had. Miguel dragged her to shallower ground, both of them gasping. Pete appeared, grabbed Clara under the arms, and hauled her onto the porch like a landed fish. That's enough, he said flatly. No more trips. Clara coughed up water, shaking. The rest of the supplies are gone, and you're lucky you're not gone with them. Pete's weathered face was pale. We got what we got. It'll have to be enough. They'd salvaged maybe half of what had been in the shed. Better than nothing, but not enough. Not nearly enough if this storm lasted as long as Pete thought it would. Clara sat on the porch, dripping and shivering, staring at the water that was still rising, and wondered where Ethan was. Whether he and the crew had made it to high ground, whether they were safe, whether she'd ever see him again. The storm raged for 3 days. On the first day, they lost the supply shed entirely. Clara watched it tear loose from its foundation and tumble downstream like a child's toy, taking everything they hadn't been able to salvage. On the second day, the water reached the porch steps. Pete and Miguel moved everything valuable to the second floor of the main house. Furniture, supplies, anything they couldn't afford to lose. The bunkhouse was already partially flooded, the crew's belongings soaked and ruined. On the third day, the rain finally started to ease, but the damage was done. The eastern pastures were underwater, fences were down. The supply shed was gone, along with half their stores. The creek had carved a new channel through what used to be grazing land, making it useless for cattle. And there was still no sign of Ethan or the crew. Clara stood at the upstairs window, staring out at the devastation, and felt fear settle into her bones. It had been 3 days. They should have been back by now. Unless something had gone wrong. Unless the storm had caught them. Unless someone had gotten hurt. Unless... They're fine, Pete said from the doorway, reading her thoughts. Ethan knows how to handle rough weather. He'll bring them back. You don't know that. I know him. Been working for him 12 years. He's survived worse than this. Pete came to stand beside her. Question is, can you handle not knowing? Because that's what loving a rancher means, Miss Clara. Lots of days where you don't know if they're coming home. Clara's throat tightened. I never said I loved him. Didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you look at him. Pete's voice was gentle. And his face when he looks at you. Man's been half dead since I met him. Then you showed up, and suddenly he's got something to live for besides work. That's a lot of pressure. That's life. Pete headed for the door. They'll be back. Have a little faith. Faith. Clara had never been good at that. She'd learned early that hoping for things just made the disappointment hurt worse. But she found herself hoping anyway, watching the road, listening for the sound of horses. They came back on the 4th day. Clara was in the kitchen taking inventory of their remaining supplies and trying to figure out how to make them stretch, when she heard it, the sound of multiple horses, moving slow and tired. She dropped everything and ran. The crew looked like they'd been through hell, soaked, exhausted, covered in mud, slumped in their saddles like they might fall off any second. A few horses were limping. One man, Chet, had his arm in a makeshift sling, but they were alive. All of them. And in the middle of them, sitting tall despite the obvious exhaustion, was Ethan. Clara's knees nearly buckled with relief. He saw her, and something in his face shifted, the hard mask cracking, showing the man underneath. He dismounted in one smooth motion and crossed to her in 3 strides. You're alive, she said stupidly. So are you. His eyes traveled over her, checking for injuries. What happened? The creek jumped its banks. We lost the supply shed and half our stores. She touched his face, needing to confirm he was real and whole. You're hurt. Just bruised. We had some trouble with the cattle during the worst of it. Lost about 20 head, but we saved most of them. He caught her hand, held it against his chest. She could feel his heart beating, strong and steady. Clara, I thought you might not come back. I promised I would. People break promises. I don't. He pulled her closer, right there in front of his crew and anyone else who might be watching. Not to you. Someone cleared their throat, Jack looking amused despite his exhaustion. Boss, we should probably get these horses taken care of. Ethan didn't let go of Clara. Right. Everyone, get cleaned up, get some food. We'll assess damage tomorrow. The crew filed past them into the bunkhouse. Clara saw Miguel grin at her, saw Big Sam tip his hat, saw even Tommy smile. When they were alone, Ethan finally released her. You went into the flood. Not a question. Somehow he already knew. We needed those supplies. You could have died. But I didn't. Clara crossed her arms. And we salvaged enough to maybe make it through if we're careful. Ethan's jaw worked. Don't do that again. Don't tell me what to do. Clara, you don't get to risk your life for cattle and then lecture me for risking mine for supplies we both know we need. She stepped closer. We're in this together, remember? That means I get to make stupid decisions too. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he laughed, rough and surprised and genuine. Fair enough. He pulled her close again, rested his forehead against hers. Just warn me next time so I can have a heart attack in advance. Deal. They stood like that, holding each other in the muddy yard, while around them the ranch slowly came back to life. The week after the storm was brutal. They worked from dawn until well past dark, assessing damage, making repairs, trying to salvage what they could. The eastern pastures were ruined for the season. Too wet, too torn up by the flood. They'd have to move the cattle west, which meant less grazing land and tighter quarters. The loss of the supply shed meant rationing. Clara calculated and recalculated, trying to stretch what they had. No more fresh-baked bread every day. Smaller portions of meat. Coffee rationed carefully because they couldn't afford to run out. The crew grumbled but accepted it. They'd all seen the flood, knew how close they'd come to losing everything. Ethan pushed himself harder than anyone, working until Clara had to physically drag him inside to eat. He looked haunted, and she finally understood why. This was his ranch, his responsibility, and the storm had exposed how fragile their survival really was. We're going to be fine, she told him one night after everyone else had gone to bed. They were sitting at the kitchen table, the remains of dinner cleared away. Ethan had his head in his hands, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. We lost 20 head of cattle, half our supplies, and a quarter of our grazing land, he said without looking up. Fine is optimistic. Fine is what we have to be, because the alternative is giving up, and I don't think either of us knows how to do that. He finally looked at her. How are you not terrified? Who says I'm not? Clara reached across the table, took his hand. I'm scared to death, Ethan, but I've been scared before and I've survived. We'll survive this too. What if we don't? Then we'll fail together. She squeezed his hand. But I don't think we will. You're too stubborn, and I'm too mean. That surprised a laugh out of him. Mean? You've seen me with a skillet. I'm terrifying. He pulled her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. Yeah, you are. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just breathing, just being present with each other. Then Ethan spoke again, quieter. After the war, I thought I was done. Thought I'd used up whatever capacity I had for caring about anything. He still held her hand, thumb tracing patterns on her skin. Built this ranch because I needed something to pour myself into, something that made sense when nothing else did. Worked until I was too tired to think, too tired to remember. Remember what? The things I did. The things I saw. His voice went rough. I wasn't a good man in that war, Clara. Did things I can't take back. Hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. Came home and everyone called me a hero, but all I felt was empty. Clara waited, letting him find the words. Then you showed up, and suddenly I had something to care about besides work, something that made me want to be better than what I was. He met her eyes. You scare the hell out of me because if I lose this ranch, I lose a business. If I lose you, I lose everything that matters. Clara's vision blurred. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. Yes, I do. She stood, moved around the table to stand beside him. I've spent my whole life running from anything that felt like it might hurt. I'm not running anymore. Whatever happens, with the ranch, with Victoria, with the whole damn territory, I'm staying. Ethan pulled her into his lap, buried his face against her shoulder. She held him, this strong, damaged man who'd somehow decided she was worth fighting for. I love you, he said, muffled against her dress. Clara's breath caught. What? He pulled back, met her eyes. I love you, Clara Whitaker. I know it's too soon and we've got too many problems and the timing is terrible, but I don't care. I love you and I need you to know. She should have been scared, should have pulled away, protected herself, kept her heart safe. Instead, she kissed him. It was different from the careful kiss on the dark road. This was desperate, hungry, full of everything they'd both been holding back. Ethan's hands tangled in her hair. Clara gripped his shoulders hard enough to hurt. They kissed like they were drowning and each other was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't want to. Tried not to. But I do." Ethan's smile was brilliant, transforming his scarred face into something beautiful. "So what do we do about it?" "I have no idea." "Me either." He kissed her again, softer this time. "But we'll figure it out. One day at a time?" "One day at a time." They stayed like that, wrapped around each other in the quiet kitchen, while outside the damaged ranch slowly healed and inside something new and terrifying and wonderful took root. The news about them spread faster than Clara expected. It started when Tommy rode into town for medical supplies and mentioned, casually, not thinking it mattered, that the boss and Miss Clara were together now. By the time he got back to the ranch, half the territory had heard some version of the story. Jack brought the worst of it. "Victoria's saying you seduced him during the storm, that you took advantage of the crisis to trap him." He looked disgusted. Some people are actually believing it. Clara kept kneading bread, didn't look up. "Let them believe what they want. It's more than gossip now, Miss Clara." She's talking to the other ranchers, suggesting Ethan's judgment is compromised, saying a man who'd take up with his cook can't be trusted with business decisions. That made Clara's hands still. She's trying to ruin him professionally. She's trying to ruin both of you however she can. Ethan came in, took one look at their faces, and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" Jack told him. Clara watched Ethan's expression go from tired to furious in the space of a breath. "That woman needs to be stopped," he said flatly. "How?" Clara asked. "You already threatened her once. It didn't work." "Then I'll do more than threaten." "Ethan, no. She's not getting away with this." He grabbed his hat. "I'm going to town." "To do what? You can't fight rumors with violence." "Watch me." Clara stepped in front of him, put both hands on his chest. "Stop. Think. If you go charging in there angry, you'll just prove her right, that you're not thinking clearly, that I've compromised your judgment. Is that what you want?" Ethan's jaw worked. "So what do we do? Let her destroy us?" "No. We beat her at her own game." Claire's mind was racing. She's using gossip and innuendo because it's effective and hard to fight, but gossip only works when there's ambiguity. So we remove the ambiguity. "What does that mean?" Clara took a deep breath, knowing this was going to sound insane. "We get married." Silence dropped like a stone. Jack looked between them. "I'm just going to leave you two alone." He left quickly. Clara and Ethan stood facing each other in the kitchen, the weight of what she'd just said hanging between them. "Married," Ethan repeated. "Yes." "Clara, that's practical. If we're married, Victoria can't claim I'm some mistress or seductress." "She can't say you're compromised by scandal. We'd just be a married couple running a ranch." Clara forced herself to keep talking, not think too hard about what she was proposing. "It solves the gossip problem, and it makes legal sense. If something happens to you, I'd have rights to the ranch instead of being thrown out. And if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that. The flood proved how dangerous this life is." She met his eyes. "I'm not proposing out of love or romance, Ethan. I'm proposing because it's the smart tactical choice." He stared at her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Completely. Clara, marriage is a legal contract, partnership, mutual protection." She crossed her arms. "Unless you don't want to marry me, which is fine, but then we need another plan to deal with Victoria." Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "Stop. Listen to yourself. You're talking about marriage like it's a business arrangement. Isn't it?" "No, it's—" He stopped, frustrated. "Clara, I already told you I love you. If we're getting married, I want it to be because we both want a life together, not because Victoria Hale's spreading rumors." Clara's throat tightened. "I do want a life with you, but I'm also practical enough to know that marriage solves multiple problems. Can it be both?" Ethan pulled her close, rested his chin on top of her head. "You're the most exasperating woman I've ever met." "Is that a yes?" "That's a, we need to talk about this like rational people, instead of making huge life decisions in a panic." "I'm not panicking." "You're proposing marriage as a tactical maneuver. That's definitely panic." He pulled back, looked at her seriously. But you're not wrong. Marriage would solve a lot of problems. The question is whether that's the right reason to do it. Clara considered. Everything she'd said was true. Marriage made tactical sense. But if she was being honest with herself, that wasn't the only reason she wanted it. She wanted to belong to someone, wanted to be chosen, wanted the security of knowing that Ethan Cross was hers and she was his, legally and permanently. But saying that out loud felt too vulnerable. "Ask me again when you're ready," she said instead. "Not because of Victoria, because you want to." Ethan's smile was soft. "And if I'm already ready, then you're moving faster than I am." He kissed her forehead. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." But time, as it turned out, was something they didn't have. 2 days later, Victoria made her final move. She spread the story that Clara had been pregnant when she arrived at Iron Ridge, that she'd trapped Ethan into protecting her, that the whole relationship was built on lies and manipulation. It wasn't true. Any of it. But the story was salacious enough that people wanted to believe it. Jack came back from town looking like he wanted to hit something. "It's bad, boss. Real bad. People are saying—" He glanced at Clara. "They're saying terrible things." "Let me guess," Clara said flatly. "I'm either a whore or a con artist or both." Something like that. Ethan's face had gone cold and dangerous. "This ends now." "How?" Clara asked. "We can't prove a negative. We can't make people stop talking." "No, but we can give them something else to talk about." He turned to her. "Marry me." Clara's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me. Today. Right now. We ride into town, find someone who can perform the ceremony, and we get married." His eyes were blazing. "Then Victoria can say whatever she wants. We'll be married. Legally. Publicly. And everyone will have to accept it." "Ethan, that's what you suggested 2 days ago." "As a tactical decision, not— I don't care about tactics anymore, Clara." He grabbed her hands. "I care about you. I care about protecting you from people who think they can destroy you for sport. And I care about building a life with you, whether that life looks conventional or not." Clara's eyes were stinging. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He pulled her closer. "I know this isn't romantic. I know we're doing it for the wrong reasons, or at least not the traditional reasons. But I meant what I said. I love you. And if marrying you now means protecting you from Victoria and every other vicious gossip in this territory, then that's what I'm doing." Clara looked at this man, scarred, stubborn, offering her everything he had in the most awkward, practical proposal imaginable, and she loved him for it. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Let's get married." Ethan's grin was fierce. "Jack, get the wagon ready. We're going to town." They were married 3 hours later by a surprised judge who tried to talk them into waiting, planning properly, having a real ceremony. Ethan cut him off. "We're both adults. We know what we're doing. Just perform the ceremony." There were no flowers, no music, no guests except Jack and Miguel, who'd ridden along as witnesses. Clara wore the green dress Ethan had bought her. Ethan wore his cleanest work clothes. The judge's office smelled like old paper and tobacco. It was perfect. When the judge pronounced them married, Ethan kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. Clara kissed him back, feeling something settle in her chest, something that felt like coming home. "Well," Jack said when they finally broke apart, "that's done." "That's done," Ethan agreed. They filed the marriage certificate immediately, making sure it was official and public. Then Ethan did something Clara didn't expect. He walked straight to the newspaper office and placed an announcement. Mr. Ethan Cross and Mrs. Clara Whitaker were married today in a private ceremony. The happy couple will make their home at Iron Ridge Ranch. The newspaper editor's eyebrows nearly hit his hairline. "Mr. Cross, are you certain?" "Print it. Front page, if possible." "But the rumors are just rumors. This is fact." Ethan's voice was hard. "And anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me directly." The announcement ran the next day. Clara imagined she could hear Victoria screaming from 5 miles away. That night, in the ranch house that was now officially their home, Ethan and Clara sat at the kitchen table as husband and wife. "No going back now," Clara said. "Didn't want to go back anyway." Ethan laced his fingers through hers. "How do you feel?" "Terrified, relieved, happy." She looked at their joined hands. Like I finally found something worth keeping. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, just being together. Outside, the damaged ranch continued its slow recovery. Inside, something new had been built, messy and imperfect and real. One day at a time, they'd figure out the rest. The morning after the newspaper announcement ran, Clara woke up married. It felt strange. Not bad strange, just different. She lay in the narrow bed in her room off the kitchen. Their room now, technically, though Ethan had spent the night in his own quarters in the main house to avoid scandalizing the crew more than necessary, and tried to wrap her mind around the fact that she was Clara Cross now. Mrs. Ethan Cross, a wife again, after swearing she'd never let herself be that vulnerable. She got up, dressed, and started breakfast like always. The routine helped. Flour, water, salt for biscuits, bacon in the skillet, coffee, brewing strong enough to wake the dead. The familiar motion steadied her, reminded her that some things didn't change just because you signed a piece of paper. The crew filed in at 5:30, same as always. But there was a difference in the air, curious glances, careful politeness, like everyone was waiting to see how this new reality would play out. Tommy was the first to speak. "Congratulations, Mrs. Cross." The name sounded foreign. Clara nearly looked around to see who he was talking to. "Thanks, Tommy." "Does this mean we get cake?" Big Sam asked hopefully. That broke the tension. Everyone laughed, and just like that, the awkwardness dissolved. They were still a crew, still a family of sorts, just with slightly different paperwork now. Ethan came in last, looking like he'd slept about as well as Clara had, which is to say, not much. But when their eyes met across the kitchen, something warm and solid passed between them. Married. They were married. The reality of it hit Clara all over again. After breakfast, Ethan pulled her aside. "We need to talk about sleeping arrangements." Clara's stomach flipped. "Okay." "Your room's too small for both of us. My room's bigger, has an actual bed instead of that cot you've been using." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. "I'm not assuming anything, just being practical." "Practical." Clara's mouth twitched. "We got married for tactical reasons, and now we're being practical about sleeping arrangements. Very romantic." "Clara, I'm teasing." She touched his arm. "Your room makes sense, and Ethan—" She waited until he met her eyes. "I know what marriage means. I'm not afraid of sharing a bed with you." Something heated in his expression. "Good to know. But maybe we move my things after the crew's asleep? No need to make it a public spectacle." "Agreed." He caught her hand, pulled her closer. "You okay? With all of this?" Clara thought about it honestly. "I'm terrified, and I'm relieved, and I keep waiting for something to go wrong because this feels too good to last. But yes, I'm okay." Ethan kissed her forehead. "One day at a time." "One day at a time," she echoed. But the days were about to get much harder. Victoria's response came that afternoon. A writer arrived at the ranch carrying an official-looking envelope sealed with wax. Ethan opened it, read in silence, and his face went hard. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Victoria's calling in a debt." He handed her the letter. Clara read quickly. The language was formal, legal, but the message was clear. 5 years ago, Ethan had borrowed money from Victoria's father to expand the ranch. The loan was supposed to be interest-free, payable when convenient, a gentleman's agreement between neighboring ranchers. Victoria was now demanding full repayment, 30 days or she'd foreclose. "Can she do that?" Clara asked. "If she has the original loan documents, yes." Ethan's voice was tight. Her father was a decent man. "We shook hands, nothing formal. But if she's got something in writing, how much?" $3,000. Clara's heart sank. That was more than the ranch made in a good year. "Do we have it?" "Not even close. Storm damage set us back. Lost cattle, lost supplies, repairs we still need to make." He crumpled the letter. "She knows exactly what she's doing, knows we can't pay." "So what happens if we can't?" "She takes the ranch, everything, and we're left with nothing." The weight of it settled over Clara like a physical thing. They'd fought so hard, survived the storm, survived the gossip, gotten married to protect what they were building. And now Victoria was going to take it all anyway. "There has to be something we can do," Clara said. "Like what? I don't have $3,000, can't borrow it. No bank's going to loan to a rancher who just took major storm damage. Ethan's frustration was palpable. She's got us cornered. Clara's mind raced. Money. They needed money. Fast. What about the cattle? She asked. Could we sell some early? Not at the price we'd need. And selling too many would hurt the herd long term, make it impossible to recover. Ethan sat down heavily. I've been running scenarios all afternoon. None of them work. Then we find a scenario that does. Clara pulled out a chair, sat across from him. Talk me through the finances. Everything. Maybe I'll see something you missed. They spent the next 3 hours going over every aspect of the ranch's economy. Income from cattle sales, expenses for supplies and wages, the cost of repairs, the value of the land itself. Clara took notes, asked questions, tried to find an angle. The numbers didn't lie. They were short at least $2,000 with no clear way to make it up in 30 days. Jack found them still at the table after dark. You two eaten? Not hungry, Ethan said. That wasn't a question. Jack set down plates of food. Clara realized with a start that she hadn't cooked dinner, had been so absorbed in the finances she'd forgotten entirely. Miguel made stew. It's not as good as yours, Mrs. Cross, but it'll keep you alive. Clara looked at the food, looked at Jack's weathered, concerned face. When did Miguel learn to cook? When you got married and stopped noticing the rest of us needed feeding. Jack's tone was dry, but not unkind. Eat. You can't fight this on an empty stomach. After he left, Clara and Ethan ate in silence. The stew was adequate. Miguel had followed her recipes well enough, but it tasted like ash in Clara's mouth. I should have been paying attention, she said quietly. To what? To the crew. To the kitchen. I got distracted by... She gestured helplessly at the financial papers scattered across the table. By trying to save our lives? Ethan set down his spoon. Clara, the crew's fine. They can feed themselves for one night. This is more important. Is it? If we lose the ranch, none of this matters anyway. We're not losing the ranch. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Ethan's voice was hard, certain. Because I've lost everything before. After the war, I had nothing. Built this place from dirt and determination. If Victoria thinks she can take it because she's got money and connections, she's wrong. I'll find a way. Clara wanted to believe him, but the numbers on the page told a different story. That night they moved Clara's belongings to Ethan's room. It didn't take long. She'd arrived at the ranch with just a trunk, and she hadn't accumulated much since. Her clothes, her skillet, a few personal items. Everything fit in 2 trips. Ethan's room was bigger, like he'd said. A real bed with a decent mattress, a dresser, a chair by the window where he could look out over the ranch. Sparse, but functional, like everything else about him. Clara set her trunk at the foot of the bed and tried not to feel overwhelmed. You can have the dresser, Ethan said. I'll move my things to make room. It's your room. It's our room now. He started pulling shirts out of drawers. I want you to feel like it's yours too. Clara helped him reorganize, and slowly the space started to feel less like his and more like theirs. Her dresses hanging next to his shirts, her brush on the dresser beside his razor. Small things, but they mattered. When they were finished, they stood awkwardly, both aware that this was their first night actually sharing a bed as a married couple. I can sleep on the floor if you want, Ethan offered. Don't be ridiculous, the bed's big enough for both of us. Clara started unbuttoning her dress, trying to act casual. We're adults. We can handle this. She changed into her nightgown while Ethan politely looked away, then climbed into bed. The mattress was softer than her cot, the blankets warmer. Ethan joined her a moment later, careful to leave space between them. They lay in the dark, not touching, both staring at the ceiling. This is weird, Clara finally said. Yeah. Good weird or bad weird? Just weird. Ethan turned his head to look at her. You okay? I think so. Clara rolled onto her side to face him. Are you? I'm married to a woman I love, trying to figure out how to keep from losing everything we've built. So I'm about 50-50. Clara reached out, found his hand in the darkness. We'll figure it out. You sound more confident than I feel. One of us has to be. She squeezed his hand. Besides, I didn't marry you just to watch Victoria Hale take it all away. I'm too stubborn for that. Ethan pulled her closer, wrapped his arms around her. Clara settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Solid, steady, real. I love you, he said quietly. I love you too. They fell asleep like that, holding each other against whatever was coming. The next week was a blur of desperate strategizing. Ethan reached out to every contact he had, other ranchers, businessmen, even the banker who'd turned him down for a loan initially. Surely someone would be willing to help, willing to extend credit, or buy cattle early, or offer some kind of solution. But Victoria had gotten there first. She'd spread word that Ethan was a bad risk, that his judgment was compromised, that the storm damage had been worse than anyone knew. Whether people believed her or just didn't want to cross her, the result was the same. Doors closed, offers were retracted, help evaporated. Jack came back from town looking disgusted. She's got her claws in everyone. Even people who like you, boss. They're too scared of her to help. Ethan's frustration was reaching a breaking point. Clara watched him pace the kitchen, watched him run numbers over and over like maybe this time they'd add up differently. They didn't. Clara, meanwhile, had started her own investigation. She went through every supply order, every expense, looking for inefficiencies or waste. She talked to the crew about whether they could defer wages, take payment in room and board instead of cash for a few months. To a man, they agreed. Tommy was particularly adamant. Mrs. Cross, you and the boss gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. If you need us to work for free until this is settled, that's what we'll do. The others echoed the sentiment. It was touching, but it wasn't enough. Even saving all the wages only got them partway to what they needed. Clara sat at the kitchen table one afternoon, surrounded by papers, and felt despair creeping in. There had to be something they were missing. Some angle, some resource, some... Her eyes landed on her trunk in the corner of the room. The trunk she'd carried from town to town, job to job. The trunk that held everything she owned, including her mother's jewelry. It wasn't much, a few pieces her mother had owned, simple gold that Clara had kept for sentimental reasons. She'd never worn any of it, never even looked at it really. It was just there, a connection to a past that felt increasingly distant. But gold was gold, and desperate times called for desperate measures. Clara opened the trunk, dug through her few belongings, and found the small wooden box. Inside, a simple gold necklace, a pair of earrings, her mother's wedding ring. She held the ring up to the light, remembering her mother wearing it, remembering how her father had sold everything else after her mother died, drunk away the profits, left Clara with nothing but these few pieces he'd been too sentimental or too drunk to find, worth maybe $200 if she was lucky. Not nearly enough, but it was something. Ethan found her there, holding the jewelry. "What's that?" he asked. "My mother's things. I was thinking..." She swallowed hard. "We could sell them. Every little bit helps, right?" Ethan crossed to her, took the box gently from her hands. "No. Ethan, we need the money. Not like this." He closed the box, handed it back. "These are the only things you have from your mother. I'm not taking that from you. They're just objects. They're not. And I know because I've got a pocket watch that belonged to my brother who died in the war. Probably worth $50. I'd starve before I sold it." He cupped her face. "We'll find another way." Clara felt tears threaten. What if there isn't another way? Then we lose the ranch. But we don't lose ourselves. And we don't sacrifice the things that make us who we are. He kissed her forehead. "Promise me you won't sell those. Ethan, promise me." Clara looked at this stubborn, impossible man who'd rather lose everything than let her give up the last pieces of her mother. "I promise," she whispered. That night, lying in bed, Clara stared at the ceiling and tried to find hope. They were running out of time, 2 weeks left until Victoria's deadline. 2 weeks to find $3,000 they didn't have. "Tell me about after," she said quietly. Ethan turned to look at her. "After what?" "After we lose the ranch. What happens then?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Start over somewhere, I guess. Find work. Build something new. Together?" "Of course together." He pulled her close. "Clara, whatever happens, we're in this together. The ranch, the debt, all of it. That's just circumstances. But us? That's real. That's permanent." Clara buried her face against his chest, breathing him in. I'm scared. Me too. You never act scared. I'm terrified every damn day. Scared I'm going to fail you. Scared I'm going to lose this place and you'll realize you married a man who couldn't protect what's his. His arms tightened around her. But I keep going anyway because the alternative is giving up, and I don't know how to do that. Me either, Clara said. They held each other in the darkness, two stubborn people refusing to break even as the world tried its damnedest to crack them. The break came from an unexpected source. Pete wrote in 3 days before the deadline, looking excited, for the first time since Clara had known him. "Boss, Mrs. Cross, you need to hear this." They gathered in the kitchen, Clara, Ethan, Pete, and Jack. "I was talking to my cousin over in Laramie," Pete said, words tumbling out fast. "He works for the railroad. Says they're expanding the line, need cattle to feed the work crews." "A lot of cattle. They're paying premium prices because they need the supply guaranteed." Ethan leaned forward. "How much cattle? How much money?" "Enough. If we could deliver 200 head by next week, they'd pay $3,200. Cash." Silence fell like snow. Clara's heart was pounding. "That's exactly what we need." "It's also almost our entire herd," Ethan said slowly. "We sell that many cattle now. We won't have enough breeding stock to recover. It'll set us back years." "But we'd still have the ranch," Clara pointed out. "We could rebuild." "Could we?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know. Selling that many cattle, it's a huge risk." "So is losing everything to Victoria." Jack's voice was pragmatic. "At least this way we'd still own the land." "But we'd be starting over from almost nothing." Ethan looked at Clara. "It could take 5 years to build the herd back up to where we are now. 5 years of barely scraping by, no cushion, one bad season away from ruin." Clara understood what he was really asking. Was she willing to sign up for that? For years of hardship and struggle with no guarantee it would work? "I didn't come here expecting easy," she said. "I came here expecting work. If we have to rebuild, we rebuild. But we do it together, and we do it on our own land. Not on Victoria Hale's." Ethan's expression softened. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He looked at Pete. "Tell your cousin we'll do it. 200 head delivered by next week." Pete grinned. "Some already did, boss. Figured you'd say yes, so..." The next 5 days were chaos. They had to round up 200 head from the scattered herd, get them trail ready, and drive them to Laramie, 70 miles in less than a week. Every hand on the ranch was mobilized. Even Miguel, who was barely competent on a horse, was pressed into service. Clara stayed behind to manage the ranch with Pete, who was too old for the hard riding a cattle drive required. It killed her to watch them go, Ethan and the crew disappearing into the distance with everything they had tied to those cattle. "They'll make it," Pete said. "You don't know that." "I know Ethan. Man survived worse than a cattle drive." Pete spat into the dirt. "Besides, they've got good weather. No storms predicted. Terrain's not bad. They'll be fine." Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd learned that wanting something didn't make it true. She threw herself into work, keeping busy so she wouldn't think too hard about everything that could go wrong. Cleaned the entire house top to bottom, reorganized the kitchen, started planning what they'd need to purchase once they had the railroad money. If they got the railroad money. Pete found her scrubbing floors at midnight 3 days after Ethan left. "You need to sleep, Mrs. Cross." "Can't sleep?" "Can't or won't." Clara sat back on her heels, brush still in hand. What if they don't make it, Pete? What if something goes wrong? Stampede, accident, anything? What if Victoria hears about the deal and sabotages it somehow? Then we deal with it when it happens. But sitting here imagining disasters doesn't help anyone. Pete pulled out a chair, sat down with a grunt. "You know what my wife used to say? Worry is just prayer in the wrong direction. Spend all your energy imagining bad things. You miss the good things happening right now." "What good things?" Clara gestured around the kitchen. "My husband's 70 miles away, driving our entire future on 4 legs toward a deal that might not even work. And if it doesn't, we lose everything. The good thing is, you've got a husband who's willing to fight for you. The good thing is, you've got a crew who'd follow you both into hell if you asked. The good thing is, you're sitting in your own kitchen, in your own home that nobody's taken from you yet." Pete fixed her with a look. "Focus on what you've got, not what you might lose." Clara's throat tightened. "When did you get so wise?" I'm not wise, I'm just old, and I've seen enough to know that most things we worry about never happen. It's the things we don't worry about that usually get us. He left her there, and Clara finished scrubbing the floor by lamplight, trying to focus on what she had instead of what she might lose. Ethan and the crew returned 6 days later, exhausted but triumphant. Clara heard the horses and ran outside without thinking. Ethan dismounted, pulled an envelope from his jacket, and held it up. $3,200, cash. Clara's knees nearly buckled. You did it. We did it. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. It's over. We're safe. Clara buried her face against his chest, feeling tears come for the first time since this whole nightmare started. Relief, pure and overwhelming. The crew celebrated that night, not with anything fancy, just a good meal and the knowledge that they'd won, that Victoria Hale hadn't destroyed them. The next morning, Ethan and Clara rode into town together. They walked straight into Victoria's house, uninvited, unannounced, and found her in her parlor having tea. She looked up, startled, as they entered. You can't just... Ethan dropped the envelope on her tea table. $3,000. Full payment of the loan, per your demand. Victoria's face went carefully blank. She opened the envelope, counted the money. Clara watched her expression shift from shock to fury to something harder to name. This doesn't change anything, Victoria said finally. It changes everything, Clara replied. You tried to destroy us. You failed. And now everyone's going to know you couldn't break us, even when you held all the cards. Victoria stood, drawing herself up. You think this is over? You think one payment makes you safe? I think we're safe because we're stronger than you thought. Because we have people who believe in us, who are willing to sacrifice for us. Clara stepped closer. You're alone, Victoria. You've got money and land and power, but no one actually cares about you. No one would fight for you the way our crew fought for us. That's the difference. Victoria's mask finally cracked. Get out! Gladly. Ethan took Clara's arm. Pleasure doing business with you. They walked out together, leaving Victoria standing in her perfect parlor with her pile of money and her wounded pride. Outside, Clara started laughing. She couldn't help it. The absurdity of it, the victory, the sheer relief that they'd survived. Ethan pulled her close, kissed her right there on Victoria's front porch, where anyone could see. We did it, he said. We did it, Clara agreed. They rode home together, husband and wife, partners in every sense. The ranch was theirs. The future was uncertain. They'd sold most of their cattle, would be rebuilding for years, had made enemies who wouldn't forget. But they had each other. And that, Clara was learning, was worth more than all the cattle in Wyoming. That night they lay in bed in their room, exhausted but at peace. What now? Clara asked. Now we rebuild. Start small, grow carefully, make this place into something that lasts. Ethan traced lazy patterns on her arm. And we live our lives without apologizing to anyone. Sounds good. Clara? Yeah? Thank you for staying, for fighting, for choosing me even when it would have been easier to walk away. Clara rolled over to face him. Where else would I go? This is home. Your home. Ethan kissed her, soft, deep, full of promise. One day at a time? One day at a time, Clara agreed. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Iron Ridge Ranch with nothing but a trunk and a skillet, Clara believed they might actually make it. The victory over Victoria should have brought peace, but the territory had other ideas. Word spread fast about what had happened, how Ethan and Clara had paid off the debt, how they'd stood up to Victoria Hale in her own parlor, how they'd refused to be crushed. The story grew with each telling, becoming something larger than the truth, taking on mythic proportions. Some people admired it, others resented it. The resentment came to a head 2 weeks after they'd paid Victoria. Clara was in town picking up supplies when she overheard 3 women talking outside the general store. It's unseemly, one of them said, loud enough to be clearly heard. A woman like that, marrying above her station, everyone knows what she is. A cook who got lucky, you mean? Another woman replied. I heard she was pregnant when she arrived, trapped poor Mr. Cross into marriage. Clara's hands tightened on her shopping basket. The pregnancy rumor again, refusing to die despite having no basis in reality. Well, regardless of how it happened, it's shameful. The woman has no breeding, no education, no place in polite society. And now she thinks she can parade around like she's one of us. Clara had 2 choices. Walk away or confront them? The old Clara, the one who'd spent years running from confrontation, would have slipped away quietly, absorbed the insult like she'd absorbed 1,000 others. But she wasn't that person anymore. She walked straight up to them. If you're going to talk about me, at least have the courage to do it to my face. The three women turned, faces flushing with varying degrees of embarrassment and defiance. The boldest one, Mrs. Henderson, Clara remembered from Victoria's dinner party, lifted her chin. We were simply discussing the changes in our community, Mrs. Cross. You were spreading lies about my character and my marriage. Clara kept her voice level, but there was steel underneath. I'm not pregnant. I never was. I married Ethan Cross because I love him and he loves me. If that offends your sense of propriety, I genuinely don't care. Mrs. Henderson's face went red. How dare you speak to me that way? How dare you spread vicious rumors about someone you don't even know? Clara stepped closer. You want to know what I am? I'm a woman who worked hard her entire life, who lost everything and rebuilt from nothing, who married a good man despite people like you trying to destroy us for entertainment, and I'm not ashamed of any of it. She turned and walked into the general store, leaving the three women staring after her. Inside, the store owner, Mr. Walsh, who'd been polite but distant since she'd arrived, was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Mrs. Cross, he said carefully, that was quite a speech. Clara's hands were shaking with adrenaline. I probably just made things worse. Maybe. Or maybe people needed to hear it. He started gathering her usual supplies without being asked. For what it's worth, I think what you and your husband did, standing up to Victoria, paying that debt, took guts. Not many people would have managed it. Clara looked at him, surprised. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You just made enemies of half the women in town. But he smiled slightly. Though I'd wager the other half are cheering for you. He was right. Over the next few days, Clara discovered the territory had split into two camps. Those who thought she was an upstart who needed to be put in her place, and those who respected what she and Ethan had accomplished. It was the second group that surprised her most. A rancher's wife named Sarah Miller stopped by the ranch one afternoon, bringing a basket of preserves. I wanted to meet you properly, she said, smiling warmly, and to say thank you. Clara was confused. Thank me for what? For showing the rest of us it's possible to stand up to people like Victoria Hale. Sarah set the basket on the kitchen table. My husband and I have been intimidated by her for years, afraid to cross her, afraid of what she might do if we challenged her authority. Watching you refuse to bow to her pressure, it made us realize we've been giving her too much power. Other women followed. Not many, but enough to matter. They came quietly, brought small gifts, offered friendship. Some were ranchers' wives, like Sarah. Others were working women, seamstresses, laundresses, shopkeepers, who understood what it meant to fight for respect in a world that didn't want to give it. Clara found herself with something she'd never expected. A community. But Victoria wasn't finished with them. She couldn't attack them financially anymore. That avenue was closed. She couldn't destroy them with gossip. Too many people now admired them for it to stick. So she went after their reputation another way. She started a campaign with the Cattlemen's Association, suggesting that Ethan's judgment was compromised, that his marriage to a woman of questionable background showed poor decision-making, that he couldn't be trusted with the kind of cooperative ventures the ranchers relied on. It was subtle, insidious, and potentially devastating. Jack brought the news. She's got half the association convinced you're a liability, boss. They're talking about excluding Iron Ridge from the spring roundup coordination, maybe even the shared grazing agreements. Ethan's face went hard. That would cripple us. We need those agreements to survive. I know. Jack looked grim. She's found the one thing she can still hurt you with, your business relationships with other ranchers. Clara felt rage building. So what do we do? We fight, Ethan said flatly. There's a Cattlemen's Association meeting next week. Every rancher in the territory will be there. I'm going, and I'm making them listen. They won't, Jack said. Not while Victoria's poisoning them against you. Then I'll make them. Ethan stood, already planning. And Clara's coming with me. Clara's stomach dropped. Ethan, I don't think... You're my wife. My partner. You have as much right to be there as any of them. His voice was firm. "And I'm not hiding you like I'm ashamed. Victoria wins if we act like we've done something wrong." He was right, Clara knew, but the thought of walking into a room full of ranchers who'd been told she was a liability made her want to run. She didn't run. The Cattlemen's Association meeting was held in the largest barn in the territory, a massive structure that belonged to the Richardson Ranch. When Clara and Ethan arrived, at least 40 ranchers were already there, standing in small groups, talking in low voices. The conversation stopped when they entered. Clara felt every eye on her, felt the judgment, the curiosity, the hostility. She kept her chin up and stayed close to Ethan. Victoria was there, of course, standing with her brother and several of the larger ranchers. When she saw Clara, her smile was poisonous. "How unexpected," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't realize wives were invited to association meetings." "They're not, generally," Ethan replied. "But Clara's not just my wife, she's my business partner. She manages the ranch's finances, oversees supply purchasing, and coordinates the crew. She has more business sense than half the people in this room." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some skeptical, some surprised. The association president, an older rancher named Tom Crawford, cleared his throat. "Ethan, with all due respect, this is a closed meeting, ranch owners only. Clara co-owns Iron Ridge. We were married before the loan was paid, which means legally she owns half of everything." Ethan's voice was calm but uncompromising. "She stays." Victoria's smile widened. "How progressive. Though I suppose when one's judgment is compromised by personal entanglements, these kinds of irregularities are to be expected." "Irregularities?" Ethan's voice went cold. "Or just a woman participating in business? Funny how that's only irregular when it threatens your control, Victoria." "I have no idea what you mean. Don't you?" Ethan looked around the room, making eye contact with each rancher. "Let me be clear about what's happening here. Victoria Hale is trying to exclude Iron Ridge from association business because I refused to marry her, paid off a debt she thought would destroy me, and generally wouldn't bow to her authority. She's using my marriage as an excuse, but the real issue is that she can't control me." "That's absurd," Victoria said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "Is it? Then let's talk facts." Ethan pulled out papers from his jacket. "Iron Ridge has been part of this association for 15 years. In that time, we've honored every agreement, paid every fee, participated in every coordinated effort. Our herd might be smaller now due to the storm and the debt payment, but we're rebuilding. We're stable. We're reliable. What exactly is the justification for excluding us?" Silence. Several ranchers looked uncomfortable. Tom Crawford spoke carefully. "There have been concerns raised about your recent changes, questions about stability, judgment, risk assessment." "By whom?" Ethan asked. "Be specific." "Well, Miss Hale mentioned Victoria isn't an unbiased source. She tried to foreclose on my ranch out of spite, and when that failed, she started spreading rumors to damage my reputation." Ethan's voice was hard. "If you're going to exclude me from this association, I want to hear legitimate business reasons, not gossip about my personal life." More silence. Claire could see some of the ranchers wavering, reconsidering. Then Sarah Miller's husband, David, spoke up. "Tom, I've worked with Ethan Cross for over a decade. He's as solid as they come. This sounds a lot more like personal politics than business concerns." Another rancher nodded. "Agreed. Iron Ridge has always been reliable. I don't see cause to change that now." Victoria's expression went tight. "Gentlemen, surely you can see—" "What I see," Clara said quietly, surprised by her own voice, "is a group of successful businessmen being manipulated by someone who's angry she didn't get her way." Every eye turned to her. Victoria looked furious. "You have no right to speak here," Victoria said. "I have every right. I co-own a ranch in this territory. I work as hard as any of you, and I'm tired of watching you use social pressure to control people who won't bend to your will." Clara stepped forward. "You tried to destroy us financially. That failed. You tried to destroy us socially. That failed. Now you're trying to isolate us professionally, but the truth is we don't need your approval to succeed. We just need to be left alone to do our work." She looked around the room. "Most of you don't know me. That's fine. I'm new here, and I understand trust has to be earned, but I'm asking you to judge us on our actions, not on Victoria's vendetta. Judge us on 15 years of reliability. Judge us on the fact that we paid a $3,000 debt in 30 days through hard work and sacrifice. Judge us on our character, not our unconventional marriage. The silence that followed was different, thoughtful instead of hostile. Finally, an older rancher Clara didn't know spoke. Mrs. Cross, I'll be honest. I've heard things about you that made me skeptical. But standing here listening to you defend your ranch and your husband, I'm inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt. He looked at Tom Crawford. I move we table this discussion about excluding Iron Ridge. I don't see sufficient business justification. Seconded, David Miller said immediately. Tom looked around the room. All in favor? Most hands went up. Not all. Victoria's supporters remained opposed. But enough. More than enough. Motion passes, Tom said. Iron Ridge remains in the association with full standing. Clara felt her knees go weak with relief. Ethan caught her hand, squeezed it. Victoria stood frozen, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. She'd lost. Again. And this time, it was public, witnessed by everyone who mattered in the territory. She turned and walked out without another word, her brother scrambling to follow. After the meeting, several ranchers approached Ethan and Clara to shake hands, offer support, even apologize for doubting them. Clara was overwhelmed by it, these tough, practical men treating her like an equal, like someone who belonged. David Miller pulled Ethan aside. That took guts bringing your wife here, but I'm glad you did. She's got spine. She does, Ethan agreed, looking at Clara with unmistakable pride. On the ride home, Clara finally let herself process what had happened. They'd won. Again. Not just survived, but won. You were incredible in there, Ethan said. I was terrified. Couldn't tell. He glanced at her. You faced down a room full of skeptical ranchers and made them listen. That's not nothing. Clara thought about it. I think I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting other people define who I am, what I'm worth, where I belong. If they don't like me, that's their problem. I know who I am now. Who's that? Clara Cross, rancher's wife, business partner, woman who survived everything the world threw at her and came out standing. She looked at him. I'm not the person who arrived here 6 months ago with nothing but a trunk and a skillet. I'm stronger now. Better. You were always strong, Ethan said. You just didn't know it yet. Maybe he was right. Maybe the strength had always been there, buried under years of being told she wasn't enough. Maybe all it took was someone believing in her, and her learning to believe in herself, for it to surface. The months that followed were hard but good. They rebuilt the herd slowly, carefully, buying young cattle when they could afford it and breeding what they had. The crew stayed loyal, working for reduced wages until the ranch was stable again. Clara managed the finances with an attention to detail that impressed even Jack, finding efficiencies and savings that added up over time. The social landscape shifted too. Victoria withdrew from public life, focusing on her own ranch and avoiding events where she might encounter Ethan and Clara. Some of her former allies drifted away, uncomfortable with how far she'd been willing to go in her vendetta. Others, like Sarah Miller and her husband, became genuine friends. The community Clara had never expected to find slowly solidified around her. Not everyone, not the whole territory, but enough people that she no longer felt alone. The ranch itself began to thrive again. The storm damage was repaired. The eastern pastures, given time to recover, became usable again. The herd grew. And Iron Ridge started to feel less like a place they were fighting to keep and more like a home they were building together. One evening in late summer, Clara stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ethan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different everything is from a year ago." She leaned back against him. "I came here expecting nothing, just work and survival, and instead I found—" She gestured at the ranch, the land, the life they'd built. "All of this. Any regrets?" Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Not a single one." "You?" "Just that I didn't find you sooner." He kissed her forehead. "Though maybe we both needed to go through what we went through to be ready for this." He was probably right. The old Clara, the one who'd been married before, who'd let herself be diminished and blamed, wouldn't have been able to handle this life. Wouldn't have been able to stand up to Victoria, face down the Cattlemen's Association, fight for her place in this harsh, unforgiving world. She'd needed to lose everything to understand what really mattered, needed to be stripped down to nothing so she could rebuild herself into someone stronger. And Ethan had needed someone who understood survival, who wouldn't break when things got hard, who would stand beside him instead of expecting him to carry everything alone. They'd found each other at exactly the right time, both of them damaged and desperate and done with pretending to be anything other than what they were. That night, lying in bed with Ethan's arm around her, Clara thought about the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach carrying a trunk and a skillet and nothing else. That woman had been so sure she was worthless, that nobody would ever want her, that survival was the best she could hope for. She'd been wrong about all of it. Worth wasn't something other people gave you. It was something you claimed for yourself through hard work and stubborn refusal to break. Being wanted wasn't about being pretty or proper or perfect. It was about finding someone who saw you clearly, flaws and all, and chose you anyway. And survival wasn't the ceiling of what life could offer. Sometimes, if you were brave enough and lucky enough and stubborn enough, you could build something better than survival. You could build a home, a partnership, a life that actually meant something. Clara had learned that the hard way, through storms and debt and gossip and 100 small battles that had tested everything she was made of. She'd learned it through Ethan's steady presence, through the crew's loyalty, through her own growing certainty that she deserved to take up space in the world. She'd learned that love wasn't about being rescued or protected. It was about finding someone who made you want to be braver, stronger, better, and then doing the same for them. It was messy and complicated and sometimes terrifying, but it was real. And real, Clara had discovered, was worth more than perfect ever could be. 6 months later, Clara discovered she actually was pregnant. The irony wasn't lost on her. All those rumors Victoria had spread, and now it was actually true. She told Ethan one morning before breakfast, watching his face transform from confusion to shock to joy, so pure it took her breath away. "You're sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be. I missed 2 months and I'm sick every morning." Clara smiled. "So yes, I'm sure." Ethan pulled her close, careful like she might break. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," Clara confirmed. The crew was thrilled. Tommy immediately started building a cradle without being asked. Big Sam carved wooden toys. Miguel's mother sent baby clothes and blankets from 3 towns away. Even Jack, gruff and practical as always, looked suspiciously emotional when he heard the news. "About time this ranch had some life in it besides cattle and worn-out cowboys," he said. When word reached town, the response was mixed. Some people were genuinely happy for them. Others, Victoria's remaining allies, made snide comments about timing and propriety. Clara didn't care. She'd stopped caring what those people thought months ago. Sarah Miller threw her a small gathering, not a formal party, just a handful of women who'd become friends, bringing practical gifts and advice. It was nothing like the elegant social events Victoria used to host, but it was real, warm, full of genuine affection. This, Clara thought, was what community actually looked like. Not performance or politics, but people showing up for each other in simple, necessary ways. The baby, a girl, was born in early spring during a thunderstorm that reminded Clara viscerally of the flood that had almost destroyed them. But this storm brought life instead of destruction, and when Clara heard her daughter's first cry, she understood for the first time what it meant to love something more than survival. They named her Anna, after Ethan's mother. She had Clara's eyes and Ethan's stubborn chin, and from the moment she entered the world, she owned it completely. Ethan held his daughter with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with his scarred, weathered exterior, looking at her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. "She's perfect," he said quietly. "She's ours," Clara replied, which felt like the same thing. Watching him with Anna, Clara saw something she'd missed before. Ethan wasn't just a survivor, wasn't just a hard man shaped by war and loss. He was someone capable of extraordinary gentleness, of hope, of building instead of just enduring. He just needed someone to build with. Anna grew fast, the way ranch children did. By her first birthday, she was toddling around the kitchen, getting underfoot, charming the crew with her gap-toothed smile. Tommy taught her to say horse. Big Sam carved her a wooden pony. Miguel's mother sent more clothes, larger now, anticipating growth. The ranch continued to thrive. The herd was back to respectable size. They'd even hired 2 new hands, young men looking for steady work and willing to learn. The storm damage was a memory now. The landscape reshaped but functional. And Victoria Hale, who'd loomed so large in their lives for so long, had become irrelevant. She still ran her ranch, still had money and land, but her power over other people had diminished. Turned out when you burned enough bridges, eventually you found yourself on an island. Clara ran into her once in town, both of them at the general store. They hadn't spoken since the Cattlemen's Association meeting over a year ago. Victoria looked at Clara, at her simple dress, her work-roughened hands, her obvious contentment, and something like bewilderment crossed her face. "You won," she said quietly. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. "There was never a competition, Victoria. You wanted to destroy me because I had something you couldn't take, but I was never trying to beat you. I was just trying to live my life. And yet here you are, respected, accepted, happy." Victoria's voice was bitter. "Everything I tried to prevent." "You could have had all of that too," Clara said, "if you'd spent less energy tearing other people down and more energy building something real." She left Victoria standing there, and she didn't look back, because that was the final lesson Clara had learned. Some people would never understand that you could build yourself up without tearing others down. That strength came from integrity, not cruelty. That respect earned through genuine effort lasted longer than fear maintained through manipulation. Victoria had spent her whole life collecting power like it would fill whatever was empty inside her. But power without purpose, without connection, without love, it was just an expensive way to be alone. Clara had been alone for years. She knew exactly how worthless that was. On Anna's 2nd birthday, they held a small celebration at the ranch. Nothing fancy, just the crew, a few neighboring families like the Millers, homemade cake, simple gifts. Anna ran around shrieking with delight, covered in frosting, completely unbothered by propriety or expectations. She was growing up wild and free and loved, and Clara couldn't imagine anything better. That night, after Anna was asleep and the guests had gone home, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch watching the stars. This had become their ritual, stolen moments of quiet after the work was done, just being together. "Do you ever think about where we'd be if you hadn't come here?" Ethan asked. Clara considered. "I'd probably still be running. Different town, different job, same loneliness. You?" "I'd still be here, still working, still half alive." He pulled her closer. "You saved me, Clara. From becoming so hard I forgot how to be human." "You saved me too, from believing I wasn't worth saving." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the Wyoming night spread out before them, vast and dark and full of promise. Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. All the towns she'd run from, all the jobs she'd lost, all the people who dismissed her as too fat, too plain, too old, too much work. Every rejection had felt like proof that she was fundamentally unlovable, fundamentally disposable. But maybe all of it, every failure, every loss, every moment of despair, had been necessary. Maybe she'd needed to walk that hard road to end up here, on this porch, with this man, building this life. Maybe there was no such thing as wasted time, just the long, difficult process of becoming who you were always supposed to be. "I'm glad I came here," Claire said quietly. "Me too." "Even though it was hard?" "Especially because it was hard." Ethan turned to look at her. "Easy things don't change you. Difficult things, things that test everything you've got, those are what make you into someone worth being." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "Think we'll get any easier from here?" "Probably not. Ranching's hard. Raising a kid's harder. Life doesn't get easier just because you want it to." "Good," Clara said. "I don't trust easy anymore." Ethan laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Only you would say that." But it was true. Easy had never worked for Clara. Easy had been staying in her old life, accepting other people's definitions of her worth, never fighting for anything better. Easy had been running instead of standing her ground. Hard had given her everything that mattered. A home, a husband, a daughter, a community, a sense of herself as someone capable and strong and deserving of good things. Hard had made her Clara Cross, and she wouldn't trade that for anything. Years passed. Anna grew into a fierce, smart, stubborn child who loved the ranch and its horses and had her father wrapped around her little finger. The crew changed over time. Pete retired, new hands came and went, but the core remained loyal. The ranch prospered, not dramatically, but steadily. Enough to live well, save for hard times, build something lasting. Clara's friendship with Sarah Miller deepened. Other women joined their circle, ranchers' wives, working women, even a few townspeople who'd decided Clara was worth knowing. They met monthly, sometimes at the ranch, sometimes in town, sharing food and stories and support. It wasn't the kind of social circle Victoria had presided over, all performance and politics. It was something simpler and more valuable. Real connection between women who understood hard work and harder choices. Ethan became a respected voice in the Cattlemen's Association, his judgment sought by younger ranchers trying to establish themselves. He never forgot how close they'd come to losing everything, and he used that experience to help others avoid the same mistakes. And Clara became known as someone who'd survived the unsurvivable. Women who found themselves widowed, abandoned, or otherwise cast aside started showing up at Iron Ridge, looking for work or advice, or just proof that it was possible to rebuild after everything fell apart. Clara hired some of them, helped others find positions elsewhere. Shared her story honestly, the desperation, the fear, the hard-won victories. She never pretended it had been easy or that she'd been anything special. But she also never downplayed what she'd accomplished. Because there was power in owning your story, in saying, yes, it was hard, and yes, I did it anyway, and yes, you can too. On Clara's 45th birthday, Ethan gave her a gift that made her cry. A small wooden sign for the ranch gate, hand-carved by Big Sam. It read, Iron Ridge Ranch, E-Cross and C-Cross proprietors. It's always been ours, Ethan said. Figured it was time the sign reflected that. Clara touched the carved letters of her name, feeling the weight of what they represented. She'd started with nothing, built something real, earned her place not through beauty or breeding or luck, but through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that she didn't deserve better. And now her name was on a ranch gate, declaring to anyone who passed, this is mine. I earned it. I belong here. It was everything she'd never known she wanted. That evening, the whole crew gathered for a celebration. Anna, now 8, helped Clara cook a feast. She'd inherited her mother's talent in the kitchen, along with her father's stubbornness. They ate until they were stuffed, told stories until they were hoarse, laughed until their sides ached. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, Clara walked out to look at the sign one more time. The moon was bright enough to read by, and she traced her name with one finger. Clara Cross. Not Clara Whitaker, the widow nobody wanted. Not just the cook or the wife or the woman who'd survived, but Clara Cross, co-owner of a working ranch, mother, friend, someone who mattered. She thought about the woman she'd been when she'd arrived here, heavy, plain, middle-aged, invisible. The world had told her that woman had no value, no future, no hope of anything better than survival. The world had been wrong. Because value wasn't about being young or beautiful or born into the right circumstances. It was about what you did with what you had. About showing up, doing the work, refusing to break even when breaking would be easier. It was about finding people who saw you, really saw you, and choosing them as hard as they chose you. It was about building something that lasted, not because it was easy or perfect, but because it was real. Clara had built that. Against every odd, despite every obstacle, in the face of a world that told her she couldn't, she'd built a life that mattered. And standing there under the Wyoming stars, looking at her name carved in wood above the gate to her home, Clara Cross felt something she'd spent most of her life chasing and never quite catching. She felt like she belonged. Not because anyone had granted her permission or decided she was worthy, but because she'd claimed it for herself, one difficult day at a time, until belonging wasn't something she hoped for. It was something she lived. Ethan appeared beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. They stood together in comfortable silence, looking at the sign, the ranch, the life they'd built from desperation and determination. "Happy birthday," he said quietly. "Best one yet," Clara replied. And she meant it. Because this birthday wasn't about getting older or marking time. It was about celebrating everything she'd become, everything they'd built together, everything that was still possible. The scars remained, from the storm, from Victoria's attacks, from the long years before she'd found this place. But scars just meant you'd survived something that tried to break you. And Clara had survived everything. She was still here, still standing, still building, and that, she'd learned, was the only victory that really mattered. Anna called from the house, wanting her mother for something. A story, a glass of water, one of the 1,000 small needs that made up a child's life. Clara turned to go, but Ethan caught her hand. "I love you," he said. Simple, direct, true. "I love you too," Clara replied. They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. Because that's what you did when you'd built something real. You protected it, nurtured it, fought for it when necessary. And you kept moving forward, one day at a time, trusting that the hard work would be worth it. It always was.